Right. Now, are you getting two of me? I don't know. Okay, I can hear myself like that. Guys, can you hear me on YouTube? So for those people that can't join on, okay, great. Hi, above all things love on YouTube, Artifact, Bo Sinclair, Siljo, Venom K, Martin Kemp, Screwdriver Tuning and EBB, and D2105K. There's a couple of things I wanted to do this evening, and I'm not doing any of those because I thought it was about time we had a discussion. I think there's lots of things to discuss, and really I wanted it to be you guys to have a think about what you wanted to have answers to as best as possible. I will talk a bit about the direction of the MFMP this year, and now that we're moving into phase 3 of the project, which is to try and assist those people out there to explore the potential opportunities that are available with this technology. Of course, you are aware that I've been assisting Binja and Huang in Taipei, and I have been assisting Malcolm Bendel in wherever he is on planet Earth at any one point in time. I think that's in the UK right now, but I can't ever be sure. Hi, Misunderstood. What a great name. So I'm just going to see if there's some more people trying to come in. Okay. Gordon's joining on his iPhone. So whilst we're waiting for anyone else to come into the room, we have 36 on YouTube and about, what have we got, 15 in the room. We can take 45, I think, actually, or 49 in the Zoom with my level of subscription. Yeah. So a couple of things. I will be presenting at a conference in June, and I should have the date with me, but look out for that. It's called the Cosmic Summit, and I will have a link if you want to come and see me there, and if you do use that link to buy your tickets, I actually get a $50. So of the money that you pay, I will get $50. That will help me with my transport and so forth, accommodation, I guess, going there. I will also, it would appear, we might be running a conference in the Czech Republic, and I will be doing that with. He's actually on another meeting right now, which I've had to leave. But it's going to be part alchemy. It's going to have these devices called Therify and Quantify. So you can probably guess who I'm talking about. But I think it's going to be very interesting. I don't want to say too much about that right now until we have a full quorum. But that will be sometime in September. Part of that will be in Prague, and then part of that will be down here in Brno, and you will be able to see Hutchison samples. You will be able to see the original Chelani cells. You'll possibly be able to do some ultra experiments and these kind of things. Much of the things that will be discussed, you're probably familiar with yourselves, but it would be great for an opportunity for people on this side of the pond to get together and have a bit of an experience, and not just with the thinking that the MFMP has put out over these last few years, but also with this other technology. Hopefully, I will be able to do a demonstration with that technology before that date, which again I've kind of hinted at, but I think there might be a way to replicate something that Tesla did, which was probably one of his most striking demonstrations. There is also a device called the Teslatron, which is in the process of being completed in the near future. And it is a kind of reconstruction of what a character called Guy Belinsky did. But apparently this device is so big that you can get inside it, and it creates these clusters of something that go into you, and you get so much of them that out of all your acupuncture points and out of your fingers, you actually get plasma coming out, and you can actually play with the plasma actually being in this device. And this was the device that Malcolm Bendel went into, where he infused plasmoids. And so it's just weird, very weird, because Malcolm was telling me about this in India, and then I had to go to Australia, and I met this guy, and they're actually rebuilding it. He says, "Do you know this guy called Guy Belinsky?" I said, "I didn't know until 3 days ago, but yes, I've heard of him." And well, we've nearly finished rebuilding this device, because unfortunately passed away, and it's going to be up and running soon. And so certainly if I end up in this machine and I don't die, you'll definitely have some good video of me being exposed and throwing plasma around, which might be quite interesting. I actually think there's 2 being built at the moment. One from this team in Canada, I think it is, and one from a team associated with Malcolm Bendel. So if needs must, I might expose myself to both of them and report back. Okay, so we got Joe Valici, and we have Benefice TV, Vernon K, Dave Strom. Okay, so I'm gonna, if that's okay, record in Zoom here, just in case it isn't, there's a problem. If anyone has a problem in Zoom, then let me know, but it's actually being bounced out to the web. Okay, so
recording in progress.
So that is going to be recorded. We got 16. I'm just going to see if there's anyone else waiting. Okay, I think that's basically it. So if you want to introduce yourselves, Paul, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? What's your interest? And we'll go through the list, really.
Sure.
Okay,
my main
I can't
focus
hear you.
is...
Why is that? That might be my end.
Oh, perhaps. If anyone else can hear me, I'm mostly interested in total integrated harmonics.
Can everyone else hear Paul?
I'll type it.
Okay. Does someone else want to? Simeon, do you want to give it a go? Okay, it's my end.
Hey, well, hey, I'm Simeon Hine. I live in Boulder, Colorado. And I guess I got...
Everyone on YouTube can hear it, but I can't hear you, Simeon. So I need to fix it my end. What's going on?
Let's see. Testing.
Okay, now I can hear you. So should we go back to Paul, please?
Sure. Thank you. I'm in the U.S., of course. You probably tell by my voice, but I'm interested in harmonics. Just recently getting into plasma and finding you, Bob, in addition to your papers and various presentations you've done in your channel. And then I found, because of that, I believe, I found Malcolm, the Tesla Tech presentations from last year, and started working on the first segment of my own work on ancient civilizations and mathematics. I've actually also presented with Tesla Tech, but on Steve, his live stream on Sundays. And of course, it's a very expansive topic, so it's going to be a long project that I'll probably never actually complete. But I'm very excited about that, and very happy to be with everyone here today. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, Paul. And Ken Shoulders said that with this technology, it's too easy to end up too diffuse, and you would never achieve anything. So try picking your niche and work hard at that. So Yeah, good luck with it, and it's fantastic to hear your voice for the first time, newcomer, and brilliant. Okay, so Simeon, do you want to go?
Oh, hey, yeah. So I'm Simeon Hine in Boulder, Colorado, and I think I got interested in this topic when I saw all the repression of the Fleischman and Pons work and research. It just kind of set off some alarm bells, even though I didn't know too much about what cold fusion lunar was. I saw Mark Leclerc present at the Breakthrough Energy Movement here in Boulder, I think 2016, about cavitation. So I've been sort of technically interested in it ever since then, and I came across Bob's comments on ECAT World, and I started following Bob. I said, wow, this is someone who really understands this, and I've learned a ton just in a couple of years, probably more than I've ever learned from any other source from Bob and the MFMP. And it even inspired me to write a book about how Leonard and cold fusion apply to, biological sorts of phenomena too. So yeah, thanks, Bob.
And that's interesting because the idea that these plasmas are actually the primary state of matter is coming into the fore right now. And if we communicate through electrical pathways, why can't these structures, and why do they have to be a specific scale or a specific density to communicate? So, it's a very interesting book. I've read it, so I recommend it to anyone here that wants a book that looks at potential biologics that exist on Earth that may actually be employing these technologies in the day-to-day basis in their own lives, as it were, right?
And one more connection here. I've studied remote viewing and taught it for a long time. I've heard Hal Puthoff lecture many times, but I had never heard about Ken Shoulders, his colleague, until I started listening to Bob's presentation. So,
thank you, Simeon. Okay, Yura, do you want to pitch in here? I guess not. So, Nikita, how you doing?
Pretty much the same. Not much has changed, I guess, for the past few months. I'm Nikita. I'm based out of New Mexico, USA, and I am kind of interested in all things plasma technology related. Currently, as far as the MFMP stuff is concerned, trying to replicate something, anything preferably would be just one. I just want one. So I kind of focused in on Matsumoto's work. Malcolm's work has become a little bit more secondary, just because still have to have a tube, and it's a bit more involved, just larger scale, I suppose. But Matsumoto's work seems very promising. The arc discharges, it's easy to kind of do in your kitchen in an apartment. So,
thank you, Nikita. And actually, in that vein, I'm hoping to go to Japan at the end of May into June, hopefully. And if that does occur, I will be visiting his family and getting the original videos, and I will be capturing those with proper fields at 50 fields. Oh, sorry, 50 fields a second. No, in NTSC it's 60 fields a second using my video toaster, and then I'll be publishing those. So you'll be able to see there's a lot more videos that I captured, but because of the encoding technology, you're not really getting a scientific document, in my view. So interestingly, the pictures that he has in the book, he said that a lot of the times he was freeze framing the video and he was screen grabbing from that. So that was actually one of the methods that he used, and in effect, that's kind of what you're doing. So hopefully we can have some really good resources from the original source. And I think when you see the videos, you understand how the experiments were laid out, like the one that you've already been doing. In terms of Malcolm Bendel's thing, that you should have already had a tube by now, so should have we. And in fact, I'm going to California next week, and I was meant to be taking a tube with me, but apparently the guy that's doing them, he was ill or off last week, so they're still not finished. So, but they are being done. There's a big batch of them being done. So I guess we're all going to have to be patient. Sometimes that's just the way it is. So yeah, we're waiting just like you are waiting. Okay, William, it's great to have you here. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself? William Schwand?
Sure, I'm Bill. I'm real interested in static electricity. I stumbled onto Bob when Bob was speaking about MH370, and I had already kind of been on this topic anyway. I bought a bunch of magnets, and I'm real interested in the way electricity makes magnetism. And I'm a writer. I write about these topics on Substack frequently at williamschwant.substack.com. And I love the work. The cavitation stuff has really opened my eyes to something new, and I'm here for the ride.
Awesome, Bill. Thank you for joining us. Stephen B. Halls.
Yeah, I'm here. What am I supposed to do?
Introduce yourself, your interest in the area, and so because I'd like people to ask each other questions as well during this session.
Okay, so I'm a retired radiologist, which is only pertinent because that's a long career of looking at images all day, sitting on my butt, being a detective and looking for stuff to be a detective about. So after I retired, I moved into figuring out symbolism. So I've been doing that for 4.5 years, and I've got pretty far with that. So that's how I spend my time. But along the way, it's all related to, they're encoding torus physics, energy flows, and that's the same thing that we're emerging from the dark ages now back into what Bob is bringing us from all over the world. And I'm here to learn and give it attention, because giving attention helps things manifest.
Yeah, awesome, Stephen. And Stephen has helped out. In fact, some of the work that we did over the last couple of years would not have been possible without Stephen's help. And also, that's not just in his visual help. He has a very unique eye for the sort of ancient type of ways of representing this technology. I think he's on board with the idea that they weren't just drawing pretty pictures for the sake of it being pretty. They actually had some meaning. And again, I'm going to show you some images from the Prague Natural History Museum, not on that vein, although I did gather many whilst I was there. And I'm just surprised that all of these very important things were just completely imbued with these key structures. And it's like, if you're going to make something pretty, why is it always this thing that you're choosing? It's like, what happened 150 years ago that everyone stopped using this type of imagery and started drawing flat things? I don't know, but Stephen's, if you, how do you communicate your work, Stephen?
I'm Stephen B. Halls on Facebook, so I post regularly. And my symbolism posts are quite different from everybody else's, because I'm really rigorous about putting evidence. So I never have a post that just has 1 or 2 images. It's always like 6, 8, or 10 images. And then
sorry, you muted. I don't know why. Yeah, carry on.
Can you hear me again?
Yeah.
So you got that I was on Facebook under the same name, Stephen B. Halls. I post a lot there. That's where my symbolism stuff, just as a running commentary on things that I discover. Well, discover means that people already know it and I'm just catching up.
Realize, yes. Thank you, Stephen. Aidan, do you want to introduce yourself? Okay. 13146. Okay. Rick?
Hello, pleasure. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Rick. Go fire away.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm Rick Gutierrez, and I live in Durban, South Africa. I'm a physician by profession. I'm sort of interested in all the things. I got started with the ECAT probably 10 or 11 years ago, and then I've gravitated, Bob, to your work. Very interested in the sacred geometry. I just love the positive and hopeful thing that we can integrate all this knowledge, and even by replicating, perhaps solve some of the major problems in the world. I've spent my time divided between Hungary, Ukraine, South Africa, and a little bit time back in the States too. So I think it's wonderful that we have a worldwide community here. And thank you so much, Bob, for your creative integration of many things, and Godspeed to your work.
Thank you, Rick. Well, it's great. You're the first guy that I know that's pitching in from South Africa, so that's really wonderful. So thank you, and it is a team effort. It's always a team effort, and so if you have any inspiration, please share forward and share back. Okay,
Will
so
do.
three. Do you want to introduce yourself? Okay, Ken Pratt.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ken Pratt. I'm a longtime cold fusion researcher, alternative energy enthusiast, and been following Bob for quite a while. Was in the original second conference or first conference on cold fusion in Salt Lake City, Utah, and that's where I'm actually from and living at is in Utah, USA. I like to replicate and build things. Done lots of different energy replication devices over the years. Not so great in terms of accuracy or quality, but at least in terms of enthusiasm, I think I've had a pretty fair share. Losing a lot of that nowadays when I'm getting older.
Thank you very much, Ken. And Lithnik, I think the last.
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Lithnik. Go
Thank
for
you.
it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm from Norway, and I originally got introduced to this through a Joe Rogan episode with Randall Carson, and from there I found the Thunderstorm generator, and it was just too big, if true, a question that I couldn't let this go, and I've been following slowly, and then eventually I stumbled upon your channel, and I've just binging episodes and trying to learn more and more about this. So I eventually hope to build my own Thunderstorm generator, but I'm waiting on some parts to be available before that. So right now I'm just learning as much as I can.
Awesome, Lithnik. Great. And yeah, it's nice that you're looking to channel that energy into doing some experimentation. It takes researchers, it takes people who they're web ferrets. It takes people who have got the mathematical skills and also critical skills. But people have got to be critical of everything that I say, everything that anyone else says, because we want to iterate to something that works. Now, in terms of the Thunderstorm generator, the next big thing from my point of view is the sample that we have on the beamline up in Scandinavia there. And we should get an answer back on the 11th. And what we are hoping to see potentially is a non-natural isotopic ratio of either 13 carbon over 12 carbon or 14 carbon over 12 carbon, or possibly 15 nitrogen over 14 nitrogen. If we see anything like a reasonably significant departure from natural ratios there, it's going to be big news, because it's showing a stepwise transmutation of the material. I'm hoping to get a sample, another sample from the large 24-inch sphere that ran in Melbourne over 8 years, about 500 hours of testing, where in one area in the north part of the sphere, there is this large yellow deposit you might have seen from some of the videography I did. And it turns out that this is sulfur rich. And what I want to do is I want to test that because, and in fact, with this beamline as well, because they do this sulfur 34 over sulfur 32 ratio. And they also do the 18 oxygen over 16 oxygen ratio. And why that's important is because we've already shown in the Amasa gas exposure on a 10 yen coin apparent synthesis of sulfur. Of course, we didn't know the isotopic ratio of that, but that shows a fusion potentially of 2 oxygens, 16s, let's say, or 2 oxygens going through to sulfur. If we see an abundance of sulfur 34, then not only does it support the sulfur 34 over sulfur 32, not only does it support that this is potentially a nuclear process going on, the overabundance of sulfur 34 would indicate support for Bin Juan Huang's work in terms of the production of oxygen 17. 2 oxygen 17s goes to sulfur 34, and so it's like we get a 2 for 1 with that particular data if that comes back. So yeah, I'm hoping to do some experiments as well in California using the Ultra experiment. Very simply, I've asked Alan Goldwater to prepare a calcium oxide scrubber, which is what was used by Bin Juan Huang to remove carbon dioxide from the gases coming out, and also a desiccant, so that when we've got we use the Ultra experiment, and we're just going to suck in gas through into the Cirrus 3 quadrupole mass spectrometer, this process gas analyzer, to see if we are producing non-natural isotopic ratios of gas. So we'll real time be analyzing from aluminium sitting in an ultrasonic tank to see if we're going to get some gas synthesis. So those things are coming up. And if we manage to do that experiment, of course, you guys will know pretty much as soon as it's done, what the data is hot off the table. So does the person on the iPhone, are they able to introduce themselves? If not, we'll go to any questions that people have. No. Okay, I've got one question that I need to answer. Oh, so it's Harry. Okay, hello, Harry. So can you speak, Harry? Okay, you need to unmute your iPhone. That's a no. Okay, so there was one question about whether that there is. So there was some confusion with the Thunderstorm generator about what is the patented, or there's a notion about a patented version and a non-patented version. The non-patented version is the one that you've seen as it's been put out in different at Tesla Tech. It was put out at when we were in Zurich, and so those photos are showing this non-patented version. The patented version, essentially, as far as I understand it, what was being applied for is essentially a slightly different configuration of the device, and the long and the short of it is, as far as I can see, it's accentuating the vortex flow that's going on. So it's a slightly different form to it, but I think the principles are essentially the same as the one that everyone's seen. So and that actually has been applied for to a degree. There was a problem. So Paul said, so have we gotten schematics beyond Malcolm's initial design for car retrofits? No. At the moment, there's 2 focuses that they are conducting. One is on these large Perkins 400 kVA, the sort of 300 kilowatt generators that work off either tip gas or natural gas or diesel generator versions. Then the other one is for these kind of like Honda generators that go up to about 5 kilowatts of output. I think the work that's being done in India, they are, assuming it delivers, and they're certainly getting the results when it comes to wiping out the carbon monoxide. And the data that I understand that's being generated is reducing the amount of carbon dioxide that's coming out, although I'm not, working hands-on with that. If it is reducing these emissions in a significant way, and it's still as efficient, or if not more efficient, than the current exhaust systems, then my understanding is that that could be rolled out all across India. And for me, that is a huge win already for the technology in terms of cleaning up the air of India, which has recently said in October that they're going to double their coal use in the coming years, and as recently as last month, triple their gas use. So the amount of hydrocarbons that the largest populated place on Earth is going to use is going to probably, I would say, more than double, if not triple, over the next 5-10 years. And so having a means to prevent the emissions is huge, right? So who wants to fire away with any questions, either of each other or to me? As you can raise your hand, Simeon's done it physically, so I'll take one from him.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah.
Thanks. I have a question about Kladoff's interpretation of cavitation versus sort of your and MFMP. I was listening to your translation again, thanks very much, of the patent that you published recently. So he's very much into the kinetic description of how you get this stepwise transmutation. How do we bridge our view, kind of the more resonant view of Leonard, with the Kladoff idea?
So it's essentially where you get these pressure changes, and you effectively get some cavitation going on. And he would appear to have defined the precise relationships depending on the material properties at a particular temperature and pressure of a particular fluid, and what achieves the growth of a bubble to a certain size, and then the means by which it can collapse within a certain domain. And if that turns out to be true, that is an incredible piece of work, very, very important. And I know it's something that will benefit Benjamin Huang hugely, because he his challenge is to know precisely what causes the thing to work and what causes it to not work. Now, I think what I've seen, for instance, with Mizuno experiments, when you do a Mizuno experiment, you don't really get anything until you get to about 70 degrees. And then from 70 degrees to like 90 degrees, the magic happens, and then it kind of stops happening. And part of that reason is because it's boiling, okay? And this is actually in the review of the work of Benjamin Huang in by Shishkin. If you recall in his video that I shared recently, his is actually a stator with like keyways radially cut in it, and then he has like they're slots rather, and he's got a key radially that goes in there, and it's extreme shear that's causing the cavitation. At his point, he says, when it rapidly raises the temperature, and when it goes to the point where most of it's boiling, then the cavitation stops and it's no use at that point. So what has been achieved by Benjamin Huang, and what has been achieved by Kladoff, it would seem, is to have the water coming in at the operating temperature, which is such that the P3 ratio, the vapor pressure in there, can be put to 0. Right, so you don't have to worry about that part. You're looking at the P1 and P2 ratio, and so you can work with that parameter space and control it with just that kind of bleed off between the input pressure and the output line. In the case of Benjamin Huang, he's got the device, the injector with the cavitator, which in one embodiment is a Venturi, which is very similar to the Popotov device, where you have the two magnetostrictive, how should we put this, rarefaction pulse generators. And when the rarefaction pulse collides, as I've described in a previous video, they create a soliton, and the soliton then has its own pressure domain that goes through the Venturi, and it creates the cavitation that then collapses in on itself. So it's in the middle of the stream. So that is one of the approaches that because he's done many approaches, he's doing so many reactors. But the key thing is that when you're generating the extra heat, you're then not keeping the process with where the temperature range is changing. You're then sending that round and putting the heat into a heat accumulator and feeding more water in, so you're always working in the right temperature domain for the process to occur. Okay, so what we found actually in many LENR experiments is, and I've discussed this before, let's say you've got a nickel hydrogen system. If you only have a particular temperature range at which the process occurs, and you have a system where everything's meant to go up and down with the whole average temperature of the whole device, as soon as it achieves the right temperature, it goes out of the domain at which it works. Okay, so that's what I think Kladoff has really nailed in that presentation. Now, speaking to your direct point, in the ultra experiments, we are specifically finding resonant areas. And I think that in the work of Leclerc that you referred to earlier, he had a high pressure going into a low pressure. And in the process of going from the high pressure to the low pressure, he had a sheet perforated with two different size holes of aluminium. And then it's rolled up into a Swiss roll. And so as it goes through, and it goes through the various sections, you've got different bits of shear going through those different sections. So his device is actually a shear with a pressure drop, and it's sweeping across a large parameter space. Now, when you look at his analysis of his device, he finds one area that has a diamond bloom on it, or chips. And what you're actually seeing there is that there are particular areas in that overall device where all of the parameter spaces are correct. Yeah? All of the parameter spaces correct. And this is like when you have the Amasa vibrator plates going up like here. It's not the whole thing that is producing cavitation spots. It's only the bits where it's correct. Okay? Now, what Tony Giavoni has done, and I can potentially show you the video in a minute, he's created an entire programmable parametric system for varying all of the aspects of the Kladoff impeller and the holes and where the shear occurs and so on. And I may share that even in this video right now, or it might be a video during the week. But I think Kladoff is kind of a mishmash between the device that I've described of Shishkin with these keyways producing extreme hydrodynamic shear, and the holes of Leclerc. Of course, it preceded both of them. Now, the point is, do we know precisely what the parameters are? So let me see if I can pull up this video, because it's really, I actually haven't even watched it. I've just downloaded it. So you're going to see it at the same time I do. Let me see if I can get this up and share it. Oh, it's an MKV, so I'm going to have to convert it. Does that answer your question whilst I'm trying to convert this video?
That's great. Thank you. That's excellent. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So if someone else has a question whilst I try and get this video in a form that I can show it. Okay. Anyone?
Where do we find your link for Cosmic Summit again?
No, but I will post it in this blog tomorrow. Actually, the reality is, I never think about how I can earn money. I just think about the next thing I've got to do to take the conversation forward, and I'm always focused on that. But I have to actually register with the summit organizers so that then they give me a referral link. I haven't even got it to give to you. So that will be available this week. And so I will organize that. So I don't quite know how I'm going to do this because, oh, it might work if I share it. So I'm going to share this video. Let me see if I can do that. And it's a really nice piece of work he's done. Tony's very, very good at this sort of thing. So is it going to play it? Yeah, okay. So let me see if I can share that. Share. You'll have to see. Can you see what I'm showing here? No, you can't. Okay, so people can't on. Right, can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. And so the people on YouTube can see it as well. Okay, so you can see all the different parameters. It's a very impressive piece of work. Now, you can actually download Rhino, and you can use this for 3 months. And it allows you to run this script and be able to vary the different parameters. So he's changing the number of impeller stages here in this particular parameter. And so essentially what we're looking at here is something that's able to change every major aspect of the device and then produce engineering drawings. And then you would either CNC those, or you would cast them, or you would direct laser metal sintering. You would produce them through a range of different methods. And what he's done here is the ability to vary all of the key aspects of the device, and then it becomes a very big engineering project. And then you need to test the things that come out. So I think what he's looking at here is the different impeller diameters, and effectively it rebuilds the model. So there, it's just rebuilt the model with the different diameter. And like I say, you can download Rhino. You'll be able to have access to the script, and you'll be able to play around with generating your own versions of the model. Okay, so
did you zoom into where the cavity bubbles actually form?
So the cavitation bubbles will form in the pressure difference, I think, between where it's coming in here and where it's going through these 2 slots. So the fluid is forced through this channel, through slots here, and through a gap, and then through another slot into this area here. I don't know if you can see my mouse. I'm talking to myself if you can't. And so by changing the number of slots, the radius of these things, the profile of how the water flows in here.
And what part is going to get most damaged most quickly from this?
The part where the cavitation is cavitating. And that's the thing that the Popotov or Potapov, I can't say, it's one of the two, device did, because it actually created a cavitation in the center of the channel. But that only achieves a COP of 1.5 roughly. Ben is targeting at 2 and above. I'm wondering whether Bin can take 1 or more of his embodiments and add the aluminosilicate 5% solution and maybe stretch that up to the sort of 7, 8, 9, 10 range, whether his system will work in a sufficient way. Now, the point about this device of Kladov, it's actually 250 kilowatt motor that he was driving it with. This is not a small, you can't run this off your domestic main socket. This is for industrial heating or process heat. The question is, what do we have to do in the parameter space that is being wonderfully put together here by Tony Gibboni to enable us to get the same effect but on much smaller devices? That's the difference, really, actually answering your question, Simeon, very precisely, is resonance. It doesn't matter if you're only adding a little bit of energy each time to the point, it just builds and builds and builds until you go through the threshold at which the effect is achieved. The question is, in this device, have you got resonant areas here anyway? And so, you know, unfortunately, that's when it comes down to a serious research program. You can identify these things, but you have to do a serious research program, and that takes real money. And it's great to have the brilliant skills of someone like Tony putting his time in to enable this, but ultimately you actually have to do the physical manifestations of these things and build them and test them, and that becomes a research program. So, but by putting these things out there, hopefully someone will do it, and they will work in the same spirit. We would like to do it, but you know that it doesn't happen just because you want it to. Okay, so that's that, and I'm going to stop sharing that, and then we'll go to Ken Pratt. Ken Pratt, have you got a question on this? Ken?
Well, it's kind of all related. It's got multiple different questions, really.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there a place or an area or a group or a other than your remote view ICU chat where we can all get together and talk? Otherwise,
okay. So
all I know of is we're kind of waiting for you to organize a meet together where we can.
Yeah. Okay. So this is what I'd like to do in this direction. I have a domain name called starfire.tech. And I would like to build out a website on that. It could be in the Ghost platform. And what I would hope is that the various people that are working on particular aspects, like the Windex and that are working on, for instance, the CladOff device and so on, they would be editors of the page, and that you could work with the particular researchers there and actually become an editor, co-editor of the work. Now, in the past, what we've done is we've made live documents and so on. Whatever happens, it has to be a system that is persistent. I don't want to end up in a situation, because I published to Steam it for a period of time. Now, actually, it's still persistent. It still exists. But the nature of how you interact with that platform changed greatly. I didn't want adverts over everything, for a start. When you have these chat platforms, like, for instance, the chat on eCat World is on Discuss, and Discuss is a pain in the ass, frankly, to find historical chat things that you want to reference. It's really difficult to go through that. And if you go to these Discord forums, are they hosted on an Amazon server? And if they are, or is it owned by a third party that could just shut you off? And so this is the challenge that we faced for a long period of time, which is where to host it, where it's not going to be one of these things that as soon as you get anywhere, someone can flick a switch and all of that stuff is gone. And this was brought home to me by John Hutchison having his YouTube channel pulled with 4,500 videos on it a few years ago. And it's not just that the videos go, it's that all of the comments with the videos go. So the MFMP had a video that I put up, I think on March the 11th, 2020, and it was about taking green tea, the EGCG that's in green tea, along with zinc. And this was actually already in pre-event, literature as being shown to be effective. And I had cited the articles that were published in peer-reviewed journals in the video. And they took it down after 2 years when there was this exponential growth in viewers. Just in 2 days, it went up like 20,000 views, having ticked along with almost no views. So obviously there'd been some organic growth out there. and they took it down. I think it was an AI system that took it down. I defended it successfully, but when it came back online, it's had basically 0 views until 3 weeks ago, when they took it down again, saying it breaks our community rules. And you know what I realized when they took it down is that all of the comments are now dead. They're gone. No one could ever see those comments. So the value in the work isn't just what's put out there initially. I find most of the value in the work that the project does is actually achieved by the criticism and by the secondary research that comes afterwards. Like my research and my time spending a week or so putting together the CladOff translation, right? Now you've got what you're seeing on the screen with Tony Gibboni. He's using his skill set and a week or two of his time to create this wonderful parametric system to evaluate what is the right shape of this cavitator. So it snowballs, and you know it's about persistence. So one, probably on the Ghost platform, you can go and have a look at what that's capable of, but you can host videos there from various platforms. It's got chat, and it's a blogging and content management system. It'll be under the domain starfire.tech, and if there are web developers amongst you that would want to take on the role of maybe building the basic site. I built the MFMP's original website in 4 days, and it hasn't changed since, except when someone tried to improve it and broke a lot of the stuff. But it still kind of basically is a nice historical site. So if there's someone out there that's a web developer and they want to take on the initial build out of that site, then it would be fantastic. You know, the project has a small amount of money to assist, you know, with you know, doing stuff, but not a lot. Okay. So what is it you would ideally want to see?
Well, it's basically the same thing that you're talking about. I've got a lot of different iterations of devices, tests, different things I'd like to share, get some feedback on. I'd like to be able to work with other people and work on, you know, comment on their devices and their experiences and their experiments. But I just don't see really any good place to where we can all get together and without a pain. And you know,
I mean, honestly, there is sites like overunity.com and these kind of areas where I've dabbled in and looked in those maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I know a couple of the projects researchers they do dip into those things. From a personal point of view, I've only got so much bandwidth, and so I will only commit to engaging with a couple of places, and then that's it. If this platform is built out, then you could have, you know, a login, and you could post under your own section, and then hopefully you would get engagement on your ideas, and that would be great. I think that would be good to try and achieve that. So like maybe if you can just list the top 10 things that you would want in a platform that would meet your needs, you know, what you would need to do. And I do know it doesn't upload videos, because Substack allows you to upload videos both on the platform. Again, it's not secure. So what I found actually with my Steemit blogs is, while Steemit is still there and it allowed you to post YouTube videos, some of those YouTube videos have been taken down. So my procedure moving forward is actually to make a copy of that YouTube video, host it somewhere, and actually provide a link to a download of it. Now, you know, then you stepping into legalities. I don't mind people doing that with MFMP's project's work, because we said it's open. So like, use it as you wish, but you know, please give credit. That would be nice. So, you know, if you are going to use YouTube to record your work, and it's the best platform to do it in terms of its handling of the data, please at the same time capture it somewhere on some sort of storage that you have. Now, what we can do for people that do become regular authors, we have a server. We have a quite a large amount of video storage on that server. We can add to that video storage, and people can upload their videos, and it can be basically not on any of the cloud platforms. And it will be the backup to the main YouTube feed. So like if this goes down, click this link and you can download the video that was on YouTube type thing. But whatever, because I don't want to end up this situation where things get lost into the ether, as it were.
Right, that's one of my bigger concerns as well. I do have some comments and questions about the Windex, updates on that, mixing that with the Thunderstorm generator. I did do a prototype for the Frankenhex.
Yeah.
It's rather ugly, but it matches its author.
Can I maybe make you a bit bigger there? So how can I do it? Can I do a spotlight on you?
Well,
Let's
you
spotlight for
probably
everyone.
need to stop sharing your video.
Yeah, let me do that first. Stop share. Okay. And I'll go
Okay,
there.
so this is my embodiment of the Frankenhex.
Wonderful.
It's got D4D ratios of the first level, the second level, and the third level, which goes into a bigger tube, vortex tube. I need to do some testing on it. I need to get some holes drilled with ionization devices, whether that's a LED, UV LED, whether it's beach sand, black beach sand, if you get my drift. Well, whether it's a high voltage electrodes, one here, that sort of thing. And then do some baseline tests. I plan to stick this end here into a shop vac to create the airflow, standardized measurable airflow that you can say, okay, something happens with an addition to the device. Yeah, it's ugly. The other thing, the one thing I'd like to do, and I don't know how to do that, is maybe illuminate it with a coherent light source, helium neon laser, to be able to visualize the vortexes. If anybody's got any ideas or any thoughts or any experience with that, that's something that I'm thinking about and think would be very helpful. Now, I don't know where to put the camera at all in something like that, but at any rate, that's the Frankenhex. I do also have.
Well, whilst you're talking about that, this evening was going to be talking about the Windex. So, but
Okay.
the parties are not quite ready. But Henk-Jeroen's done quite a few experiments. He's taken the big blowers that we acquired, and he's created his mini hex and literally physically beaten some nozzles and put that in there, and it's produced much smaller particles of aluminium. This is without any high temperatures and without any ionization going on. So just getting the nozzles going in and increasing the airflow definitely does a lot more to get towards the target of where you want to go. And Tony Gibboni has built a system of servos and built some mock-ups to programmatically control the size of the whistle. And he's done some nice videos on that we will share. And he's also instrumented a large proportion of the prototype that we have. Now, I have one outstanding question, is that if you look at one of the papers that I shared, I think from 1992 onto these plasmoids, they with the spherical boundary on them, they had quantization levels. And Ken Shoulders talks about quantization levels. And I'm wondering if it might be the case that when you're working at this very macro scale, it actually has to have a quantization level, and that your overall device needs to be a specific size for it to work on all levels going down. And so this might be a stumbling block that we have, but until we've be able to parameterize it and then injected the higher temperatures, because when you're looking at the study that was done from, I think, 2004, where they looked at desiccating and powder, producing a powder of sweet potatoes, they had to have over 100 degrees on the temperature of the input air. And so, when that's going to go in, that's going to produce steam. And we've already seen from the Armstrong electrostatic boiler, when you have steam going in turbulence, it produces charge separation automatically. And so, those aspects. But yeah, there's a lot more work being done. And I think what's happening is we've got there's some people in Japan that are very interested in moving forward with the Windex. And there are also some people in Holland that are very interested in moving forward with the Windex. And there is a research facility. It looks like it's being built on the wall in the UK to do experiments with the Windex and with the clad-off device. So things are genuinely starting to snowball right now, and you might learn some experience with your device that will feed back into those research programs. So far, everyone's in the same spirit. Move forward and make sure everything's open and shared. It's just sometimes it takes time to share things. is also the issue, and that's what the platform that we're talking about, I think, would assist with. So the independent people. Because like I can't keep tabs on everyone anymore because it's getting too big. So they need to start doing it themselves, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, great. So your next thing was you got something else.
One of the other things I was going to show was the vortex generator that I had built and tested several years ago. I think it was 2015. This is a vortex tube. It's designed for water, aqueous solutions, that sort of thing. It has an electrode here for
What's that?
to do the HHO.
It's ready. That's your bowl there.
Whoever's talking about their food, they probably need to turn off their mic. Go on.
I theorized that by having two electrodes here before the vortex generation system, that it would separate charge separation throughout the vortex tube, all the way out to the cone. Let's see if I can get it apart here and show you.
Yeah.
Well, it's coming apart, but not the way I wanted it. At any rate, slidable coils up and down the vortex tube to pick up any magnetic field that might be generated. And
so what did you find with that? What's your experience so far?
I found that the tungsten electrode disintegrated. It disintegrated right here at the entrance into this T, right here at this, here at this hole, and turned to powder, turned to a greenish powder.
Green, not yellow. Okay.
Look inside here.
Yeah.
Here's what it looks like inside the. Well, anyway, I haven't had this part actually since I did the testing and tossed it, file. So as you can see, there's garbage just kind of all falling out of the vortex generation system. So
what was the point of the tungsten in there?
The tungsten was creating the charge separations. And it looks like I'm just about ready to close everything out accidentally, but By doing a Mizuno type of cold fusion test. Make sure I'm not closing things out. Separating the water, separating the into hydrogen and oxygen, separating it as it goes through the vortex snail. I expected transmutation to occur and to be able to separate those elements and all those products using the vortex tube system. But I was actually looking for magnetic generation of magnetic fields, electrical generation.
So was it 2 tungsten electrodes that you were using?
Yes, 2 tungsten electrodes.
Okay.
Just spaced so they wouldn't touch, but they would provide the.
Well, we find tungsten disappears repeatedly in different experiments, and I put this down to its unique combination. Aluminium is the most conductive paramagnetic material, because if you look at copper, silver, and gold, they're all diamagnetic. Okay, aluminium isn't. Gold, of course, is a single isotope, but silver is 2 and copper is 2. So of those 4 elements, aluminium is not only the only paramagnetic one, it is the one that's a single isotope. Okay. Now, the other thing that is high conductivity and paramagnetic is tungsten and molybdenum. Now, tungsten and molybdenum are both electrodes that so-called disappear due to thermal gain in a Mills so-called hydrino reactor. But I believe that it is the same process that caused the tungsten that Suhas Ralkar was using to mill up his other powders. And he sent me the sample and the tungsten had completely disappeared. Where's the tungsten? And I think it's because when you get these structures forming, these cavitation structures that lead to a magnetohydrodynamic structure, tungsten acts like aluminium in that it can work with it. It provides a lot of electrons to it, and it's paramagnetic, unlike gold, silver, and copper. There are other elements that are more conductive, but they are things like sodium and calcium. And these things, right, you put calcium and sodium into water, well, they do their own burning. They don't need any assistance. So, and they're also paramagnetic. So and magnesium. So the elements really that are secondly as good as aluminium are tungsten and the other one that I said. And the difference is that aluminium wants to fuse, but tungsten wants to fall apart. So I don't think you're getting cold fusion. You're getting cold fission. It's falling apart. And I think that's what happened in the 1994 or 1996 Mizuno experiment, where they had the tungsten electrode, where they had the COP of 800. I think that's the calculated COP. That's because the tungsten disappeared, just as it disappeared when you had the tungsten electrodes in the Ormus experiments in the 1980s by David Hudson. He had the 2 big electrodes disappear. And you also had it with the Langmuir probe, the $11,000 Langmuir probe in the Sapphire project. Tungsten just is not a good electrode material when you want to involve yourself with these kind of processes, unless you want to use it as a fuel, which is what I believe it was in the 225-day reactor of Alexander Parkhomov. It was the heater coil, and that the nickel in the core produced the structures that then interacted with the heater coil, and the actual excess that he got, those 4.26 gigajoules, they were from the fissioning of the tungsten, not so much the nickel hydrogen reactor part of it. So yeah, have you looked at, analyzed those samples?
No, I don't have any kind of analytical machines, spectrophotometers.
Okay, so take a section of it, put it in an envelope, reach out to me. When I'm in California, I'm going to be on Alan Goldwater's SEM. We'll have a look at it. We'll see what you got. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Excellent.
When are you leaving? Next week?
I'm going to be leaving on, next week. I try not to give my precise dates out for obvious reasons.
Fine. Okay. I'll see what I can do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, anyone want to put their hands up? I'm going to look to YouTube and see if anyone is asking any questions there. Anyone else want to ask a question? Step in. Stephen.
Okay, hi. Thinking about the destruction of the rotors that'll occur gradually in the cloud-off reactor. My question is about materials that we can stamp with the shapes that are needed. So what's your comment? Materials like glass, porcelain, silver, softer metals that we could stamp with steel. Are those possibilities?
Sorry, are we saying, can you say the question again? In terms of the construction materials?
Yeah, the spinning rotor with those curved spirals, and the piece with the little holes in it. The cavitation will gradually eat away at those things, and there'll need to be replaceable components to this. To manufacture a lot of those components, the manufacturing process, I think, needs to be a stampable thing rather than a machine thing.
I think that's a good idea. Speaking to what I've just said, there are elements that will promote the process, and there are elements that will inhibit the process. So if you look, what Matsumoto found is that copper does not absorb hydrogen. But if it's the cathode and you've got hydrogen protons being formed, they're going to go down and get stuck and aggregate. And so you're going to get a sea of electrons on top of the copper in the same place as you've got a whole dense cluster of hydrogens. It's not magnetic. So if you want a system where you want some resonance to occur and some aggregation of some magnetic charges, you want paramagnetic or ferromagnetic. Okay, so we know that aluminium, in the work of Leclerc, and I believe in our work with the Ultra experiment, is extremely good at doing this process, right? So it's cheap relatively to machine aluminium. Could it be that we consider the rotors, those parts, to be sacrificial? They are actually part of the fuel, right? And so you expect them to break. Now, the question is, do they break in such a way that it catastrophically seizes up the cavitator? Iron would allow for magnetic charges to build up, but iron is already in a place it doesn't want to go anywhere, right? So it's going to provide a kind of more stable area for the process to occur. But we do know, if you look at what Shishkin said, and this was another presentation I considered doing tonight, Shishkin, and this totally blew me away, because if you recall, in the Amasa gas on the 10 yen coin, we had the sacred geometry structure. One half made a hole and the other one shifted over. And on a substructure, you got this sacred geometry structure with zinc on one side and copper on the other, where we saw the formation of the sulfur. That is a shifting, in my view, of spin nuclei. Okay, when you have the brass that's at an angle on the piece of iron that produced the map of the Great Pyramid, and also the sacred geometry structure, copper came through and splatted down onto the iron, deposited on one side with half of the sacred geometry structure. This is copper. we have seen in the Thunderstorm generator from the outside of the inside to the inside of the outside. On the outside of the inside, we can see that it's torn away some of the chromium, some of the molybdenum, and some of the iron to make these iron-rich crenellated spheres that have got wonky crystals. And the wonky crystals are because it's got chromium and molybdenum in there. It can't form a proper crystal, okay? But on the inside of the outside, we've got this beautiful iron-rich crenellated spheres like we see in these other systems. And what I believe is there are some incredible magnetic fields, absolutely gargantuan magnetic fields, okay, that are produced by these structures. And what Shishkin said in response to Binzhen Huang's paper is that in one of his devices, he had an soft iron bolt, and large amounts of iron were taken from this and deposited into the cavitator. And then this was in 2017. This was totally out of the blue that he said, you can go and see it in the translated one that I did using AI 11 Labs. In another one that he did in 2008, he had a copper pipe heat exchanger going into a water container with a diaphragm pump, and copper was taken from the copper heat exchanger and deposited large grams, not nanograms or micrograms, grams of material, in both cases transferred. And he was saying in that video that this implies fantastic electrical currents, but I don't think it is. I think it's magnetic. So whatever we consider we're going to do here, these structures, depending on where they locate, they will tear apart any spin nuclei, the metal that we use, or atoms that we use, or any ferromagnetic materials. Okay, so I think what we need to do is first replicate the effect that Kladoff observed. And we need to do that with the easiest to machine or cast materials that we can find. And typically this is aluminium. You could machine it easily and you can cast it easily. In fact, you could cast and then finish with machining. It's not very good for direct laser metal sintering. Can you press it? I guess you can. You can certainly press steel parts. Can you press mild steel? I think you can press mild steel. And these might be quick ways, as you say, you might be able to take a metal sheet, laser cut it using a plasma laser to cut out the slots, and then press form it. The problem is you've actually got to machine the tool sets. And the tools can actually be really expensive to make for the press forming. So, you know, and this is where you come into engineering. Yeah, like it might be the best way if a certain thickness of steel can form the disposable part, and you can maybe plasma cut and then press form. And these things, you just have a, you know, it produces a lot of energy. The amount of energy going into producing one of these press form steel parts is not a lot. And you just have a maintenance cycle where every 2 months you open a couple of bolts out, you put a new one and you close it. You don't wait for it to completely fall apart, right? And that will be defined by the testing. You'll know that, you know, we can run for this number of hours at this rate of excess heat production before these things will fall apart. And that's it. Yeah. And just like I imagine on big Navy ships, they have they know that after this number of years, they've got to replace the impellers, right? The propellers or whatever. Yeah, so I think it comes down to planning, really. So your idea is to press form the parts, yes? I think that's a good idea, yeah. But we need to know more about what works first. All right, thank you. Has anyone else got something they want to add to that, or a different question? Raise your hand if you want to. I'm gonna. So who's that? Richard's iPad. Have you got something to say? You're unmuted at the moment. Okay, right, you've muted. I'm going to look on YouTube, and I'm going to remove Stephen's beautiful face there. from I don't know how to do this. You want to put yourself face full in shot, and then I can. How do I do this? I go like that. Is it going to do that? I can go.
Zoom doesn't want to spotlight you again.
No. Oh dear. That's okay. Okay, there we go. There's my mugshot. Right. Okay. So Overwhelmed Games says, question: anyone tested food blenders for radiation yet? I haven't. If anyone else has, put up their hand. Tony Giboli says, I would recommend 3D printing parts and test flow before continuing to move to more expensive materials. I think that's a very good idea. So Tony is suggesting use the wide range of 3D printers that are available, and you can print in metals as well as plastics, and actually watch the flow go through and with various designs and do some of the cheap iteration. And I think that's a very good idea, Tony. Felix, I don't say, can water plus charcoal be turned into a hydrocarbon fuel with ultrasonics? Possibly. I'm not sure it's very efficient. These things can be explored. If you caught the work of Max Formachev-Zamolov, he was actually taking the stuff that you get once you've done all your normal cracking. It's kind of stuff used to make bitumen and roads and stuff, and he was trying to upgrade that by breaking down those very long hydrocarbon chains. So it's not quite charcoal, but it's very long hydrocarbons, and making that into gases. What he actually found is some of the hydrogen in there was fused with carbon to make more nitrogen and oxygen. So that was what I talked about in the stepwise presentation. So if you start with carbon and you put it in a cavitation device, you might end up by producing nitrogen and oxygen rather than fuel. Stephen B. Halls is leaving, so thank you very much. Oh, you're going to go and see the Dune movie? Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing that this week, maybe. Well done. Don't tell me anything. Right, anyone? Okay, so William Schwant has a question. Go for it.
Okay, so I have this book from my grandfather that goes over all the electrical stuff in the armed forces from 1947. And in it, it talks about how in airplanes, well, first, you can magnetize things by putting, take a soft iron bar, put it on the north-south line, tap the south side repeatedly. You can magnetize it.
Mm-hmm.
Turn it east-west and tap the west side, and you can demagnetize it. Okay. Now, in the book, it talks about how in airplanes, you have to be careful because when the airplane is vibrating along, if you're aligned to the north-south axis, it will turn things into magnets that you don't want to be magnets. With Bingen Wang, all these things, it has this vibration to it, right? And I'm wondering if the alignment on the north-south line is affecting what's going on within the high pressure in the system. I got two other questions, and then I'll let you talk.
Hold on, I want to step in at that point because we've just found out in Neil Crichton Gold's experimental notes, because we're preparing replications, and this is another thing that the MFMP is doing, looking forward. One in Germany and one in the UK of the Lion reactors. He actually arranged his reactors north-south, okay? And he treated his fuels, they actually were between two bar magnets. So he created a localized field for the fuel, but when the reactors were running, they were facing north-south. If you remember, when you had a GET, a Global Environmental Energy Technology, if you had the rod horizontally, you had to condition it by having it north-south when you set it up. Once you've conditioned the rod, you can then move it around. If it was a vertical rod, and I think this is because of the fractality, you didn't have to worry about if you had a vertical rod. So these points are very, very important to consider. And yes, it might actually play
I'm
a
on a
role.
live stream Zoom call.
So it might actually play a role on the cavitators as well. Yes, carry on. Thank you.
Okay, so next question. With the cavitators, I was kind of smarting off in chat the other day about how it's quite a lot like Mentos in Diet Coke. And I've been thinking about this more and more, and it really seems to me like it is that way. So let's say you have this system of water pressurized, and then you whip it and make bubbles in it. Is that different from carbonating a beverage?
So actually, if you look at what was done by Kladoff, he actually added gases. And one of the gases he added was carbon dioxide. And what he found was that when you add a little amount, you didn't get any radiation. When you added quite a lot, you got radiation. But if you added too much, you stopped getting radiation again. And so if you can imagine, you've got these dissolved gases in there. They have a saturation point. You can't add any more gases. And then what you've got then going through the system is actual bubbles along with the thing. So if you've already got dissolved gases, when you change the pressure domain there, those gases are going to want to come out of their solution. And you can see that in the 2017 videos that I took of Suhas Ralkar in his lab, where you can see the solitons, and the solitons were actually revealed by the dissolved gases in the water appearing as nanobubbles and the light reflecting off those spherical cavities produced by the bubbles. So yes, adding gas in there will, but when you're doing that, you're changing parameters of the water. And his equations really are talking about because you're actually changing the nature of the fluid that you are running through the system. Yeah. So actually having gases coming out of solution and coming up to the top and popping is not necessarily the same thing as a nanobubble forming because of pressure change and then collapsing because the pressure domain has changed within that localized space.
Okay, I got one more question. Does current cause magnetism, or does magnetism cause current?
Okay, so that's a question. Yes, it's.
I'm going to be honest. To me, real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, to me, it seems like it has to be that current causes magnetation. Okay, so let's say you have like this straight current like this. It's going up, right? By the nature of it, you're going to have this circle over here like this, and then a circle over here like this. So if you think about electricity as running on like an east-west line, the north-south line would be the magnetic pole in relation to the current. Does that make sense?
What makes sense to me is the movement of charge causes a magnetic effect, essentially.
So what's in the middle of the magnet?
In my view, it's a if you go look at Ed Leedskallen, he says that there are these micro corpuscles, or the little things that are the very infinitesimally small magnetic charges, and they are moving one way through the magnet, you know, the south going through the north and then the north going through the south. There's one type and another type, and when you create the current, I like a current loop, and you get a magnetic vector going through that, I think the magnetic vector probably are these magnetic charges that are some other component in the ether or the ether itself.
I don't like that answer very much.
Why?
I don't think it explains anything, if I'm being honest.
Okay,
So think about it from my angle. If you have this figure eight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's moving like this,
Mm-hmm.
you will obviously have one circle here
Mm-hmm.
going this way.
Mm-hmm.
Over here, you have another going the opposite way.
Mm-hmm.
See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
You also have circles like this okay? And then they go up and around, and then an opposite one, okay? Let's say you're spinning like this, then you come up around. Now you have this figure 8 in front of you like this, right? The same thing would happen if you had a current going around the middle. It would make this suction over here and then a suction over here because you're in 3D space. Now, the way I see it is, you know, the dancing
suction of
girls
what?
that have the
Suction of
baton,
what? Suction of what?
suction of charge.
So you're coming from the magnetic is driving the charge.
No, call it the static electric field, and you'll know exactly what I mean. I think that no matter if you're on an ice planet far away or under the sea or anywhere in the universe, static electricity will be there. So isn't that the ether? Can we just call it the static electric field? And I got another question about that. Let's say you took 2 tornadoes, okay, and you stuck them tail to tail. Or even better, let's say you took 3 and put them tails in. The suction would create this bubble that would blow up. Bubble of what? Well, charge, okay? If that bubble collapsed on itself, if static electricity is all over the universe, then wouldn't that be like the whole weight of the entire universe collapsing on that bubble?
It's the it's like the water in the cavitation system. You're making a so-called void in there, although there is not exactly a void in there. And then it's the pressure of that fluid around it. Then the pressure can be at different levels depending on its local system. In the universe, the local system, in my view, has a higher density near gravitational bodies than it has further away from gravitational bodies. There is actually a variation there. And so if you're like in deep space, the local pressure is not quite the same because you have this other component that there's more of them. And one way I can describe it is the work of Xu Wenju, where he has these brass plates held by a mass and in 3 body alignments, and he gets a sideways movement on them. And so there must be something that is being shielded by the gravitational lensing that is then causing the sideways movement.
Okay, so that book that my grandpa left me, it's got the most interesting stuff. You were talking about conditioning the pipe. Conditioning how?
Which pipe?
You said it just a minute ago.
The gate pipe. Yeah.
How? What did you mean by conditioning?
Well, you run it with the vortex running through it, but when it's facing into the north until the rod inside is conditioned.
Okay, so in this book, they're talking about how you magnetize things and all these different ways to do them. And they are talking about how you can make compasses. Okay, like if you were out in the battlefield and you didn't have nothing else, how could you make a compass? Okay, and in there, it talks about you can take an iron bar and rub it with silk. And that will give it a negative static electric charge. And then you can hang the iron and you can put something negative charged up to it and it will repel. But if you take some fur, it will do the same thing, but positive.
It's because these different things, they carry positive or negative charge and they'll transfer it
But
to
that's
metal.
my question. Is that what you mean by conditioning? Could that be what's going on? Is it's, you know, by running it, you're giving it this static charge, and that's what the conditioning is.
So I think it's actually building a pole, and the pole is accentuated by using the Earth's magnetic field, which
But
actually...
wait, building a pole with what?
So when you have the Rank-Hill vortex, basically what you have on a gate is you have a metal rod or even a glass rod, and it has like a concave section here and then a convex section here. When the fluid comes in, whatever it is, it's a gas or something or whatever, it comes in, it produces a toroidal vortex and the Rank-Hill effect, at the front end of the spike on the fluid coming in this way. That vortex, because you have a fluid contacting a metal, which is, let's say, hydrophilic, but it actually has surface electrons on there, it's going to change the charge arrangement in that fluid that's then going around in a toroidal vortex, which then will create a toroidal moment, and it will create a complex magnetic field when it's doing that. And this will suck in these
By all these words, hang on a minute. By all these words, you basically mean whirlpools. Whirlpools that add into each other basically multiplicatively. So like if you had 6 whirlpools arranged on the points of a Jewish star, right? And they were all draining into the middle of that star, you would have 6
something like that,
independent
yes.
vortexes.
Something like that, yes.
Okay, so one last thing and then I'll be done. You stir your cup of tea, right? You stir it on this horizontal plane, right? And it makes suction on a vertical plane, right? Okay, so if you're in a 3D space, well, first of all, let's talk about the shape of magnetism, okay? So it seems to me that it's not one toroid that comes around like this. It's a hemisphere like this on the top, and then there's a point up above where there's another funnel coming down, okay? And both poles are like this. In the middle, there's a plane of inertia. What is the plane of inertia?
This is not a question I'm familiar with answering.
So like between the 2 poles, there's a spot that's not magnetic.
Yes.
So that spot in the middle would be what I'm calling the plane of inertia.
Okay, so I actually experienced this. I don't know if anyone else has, but I went to in Kenya onto the equatorial line, and they did this experiment where one side of the line, the water goes down the hole one way, and you walk across the line, it goes down the other way. But if you literally stand on the equator, it doesn't do a vortex much. It just stays, and you put a matchstick on there, and it just stays. It has trouble draining. Yeah, that's the thing. So, your point is, sorry, what is it?
Okay, so
I think it's where 2 vortexes meet. So, like, if you look at some of the
I know where I was going. So in the guy with the Thunderstorm, Bendall, you were with him, and there was this vortex-shaped tube, okay, going over to like a bubble, right? And in that corner, it was magnetic, right? You put that magnet in there, and it was really hard to pull off.
No, so actually, I've talked through that since. Essentially, what you have, firstly, the magnet that he had, and it's a large neodymium, and it has a fixed north and a fixed south, even though it's a sphere. Okay,
I have a bunch of those.
Yeah, so like if you can imagine, you've got a curved surface, and you've got a magnet, then it's convex, right? So the magnetic field lines are not coupled so well with that metal surface. But as you get to either thicker metal or metal that's more flat or convex, concave rather, it will have more magnetic reconnection. So there's 2 effects. One, when you're rolling it, it's moving, snapping from pole to pole. That's one thing. And then 2, depending on the surface curvature or thickness of the metal at a particular point, you're going to have more magnetic connection. And so it's actually harder at that point. That being said, there's 2 effects that I think is going on in that. He has a large tube on the outside and a long tube in the center. And you've got a differential thermal expansion between the 2, because the inner tube is hotter than the outside. And it will grow more than the other. And so it actually has a differential lengthening and shortening as the reactor expands. And I think that's a problem that he has to overcome. And to a degree, I think he's overcome that largely in his current iterations of the device. This wasn't a problem with the Geet because of its particular setup, but the Geet was much more problematic to get working in the first place, because you were relying on the system to create the vortex rather than the more forced system that actually creates the multi-axis shear in the thunderstorm generator. So it's much better doing it. Just to go back to your previous point, in the glassware of the Lion reactor, we saw these magnetic solitons etching themselves into the glass, and sometimes they were going in the same direction. Okay, and when they go in the same direction, you've just got a dead zone where the glass is not affected in between. And something similar, I think, is going on in the north-south pole, but it's like kind of like that. So you get a dead zone. So that one's going like that, and one's going like that. Yeah, or it's actually one's going in, one's going out.
In my theory, it's you have current coming in this vortex up out of the let's say you have the round magnet and the North Pole's up here, right? It comes up and there's this vortex here. It comes down to the North Pole where that high Gauss spot is. That's wrapping, and it's the same thing as my nunchucks. Okay, that I can swing toward myself and make figure eights, or I can swing toward you and make figure eights. Okay, so coming up out of there on the North Pole, it's doing the forward eight. On the South Pole, it's doing the backward eight, and that basically amounts to counter spinning charge at the center of the magnet. And where that charge cancels out is the same thing as the whirlpools, where if you put it in the middle on the line, it doesn't want to spin. It's because there's no charge there. That's the neutral zone. And it's this charge separation at this neutral zone that's causing the magnetism. So like, I think it's the current causing the magnetism. So like in Bendall's weird shaped things, it's not that it's the shape that's causing the magnetism, or that's causing the whirlpool, right? Like if you pump water at that hyperbolic funnel shape, it will automatically make a whirlpool, just like the drain in your bathtub. So like when you have the North Poles meeting, imagine like the girl with the ribbon thing, and she's twirling it out in front of her, right? And there's this long ribbon and it's going in one direction. If you had another one come up and meet that, if they were spinning against each other, they wouldn't screw into each other. It would be trying to screw a bolt down to the left. It won't go. But to the right, the bolt will go down on there, no problem. The same thing would happen with the ribbons. I'm proposing that this is the same thing going on with the North and South Poles. It's all about spin and shape. Does that make sense? And I think that like Bendall and all this cavitation stuff, it's all about this growing and shrinking and passing through these vortexes. Does that make any sense? Am I on the right track?
Perhaps I'm not quite getting you, but maybe if you draw some visuals together, what is the book that you're referring to?
Well, I got freaking banned on X, but it used to be on there. I'll do another post about it tonight. Okay. It's by the War Department, right? And it's from 1947. And my grandfather's signature in it. He was a frogman during World War II. Okay. And it's like all of the things to do with electricity for all of the stuff in the armed forces.
Okay.
And it's by the War Department.
Is this a public book, or is it?
I don't know. It came to me from my aunt, because see, I really just got interested in this stuff back in September. Like I had this big awakening. Well, and then when I started talking about electricity, my aunt brought it to me.
Okay, well, great.
But I mean, I imagine the stuff's in it's real, because I've tested a lot of it and it works, and it's by the War Department.
Yeah. Okay. So it would be very interesting if you could find out the name of the book, and we can find out whether it's able to be published, and whether it's something that people can go and get. And if there are interesting things in there that people can consider, I mean, you've suggested some things that I've heard of before, but maybe specific materials, or particular techniques, they might be very important to consider. So I'd appreciate if you could maybe find a way to make that more public.
I'll send it over to you on Substack. All right. Or I mean on X tonight. All right.
Perfect. Thank you,
Bob.
Bill. It's a pleasure talking to you. Okay, so Paul, do you want to chime in there? Aha, so he's got some diagrams here. So I'll add Paul in if I can. Ahead. Okay.
I was just trying to show how that figure eight plane might look in a toroid GeoGebra, or however you pronounce that.
Yeah.
And because he's talking about how you've got different directions in circles, but he's talking about 3D, which is really spheres. And so, you know, that path can look a lot different, depending on the effects you're putting into the field here. But just if it's just a straight line, also that same plane could look completely flat. Like if you flip this, flipped it over, it looks like a circle. The outside of the toroid is like a circle in 2D, and then you have just a flat line going through it. So it can look a lot different depending on your perspective here, and I'm not sure that helps them at all. But I usually can think of the whole universe and magnetism in general as a toroid. Someone else had mentioned this as well, so I don't want to take too much time here.
Okay. Is it possible you could put a short video together of your explaining?
Hey Bob,
that?
I did put a video on YouTube about the spin stuff and the motions of the circles. So if you guys want to see it, just my last name's real unique. You'll find it. I don't have very many videos up either.
Okay, so that's William Schwant. Okay, great. Thank you. Yura, do you want to step in here? Yura? He's had his hand up for a while. Maybe he's gone to sleep. Are you there, Yura? Thrall? Okay. Maybe not. Okay. I'm going to see if there's any questions on YouTube.
I think we do have a short video of from that same GeoGebra performance. Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't say anything. Carry on.
Oh, I thought you had mentioned. Do you have a short video or something of that? The diagram or the photo of the screenshot I was showing a moment ago.
Okay.
But,
can you share that video?
I have a short recording. I believe.
Okay.
Let me look for it. Give me a moment.
Okay, no worries. Cool. Are you there still? I think he has fallen asleep. He's literally fallen asleep. All right. You're on. I'm gonna add you into the spotlight.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm very well. Thank you.
I really love your channel, and I subscribe to your Substack because basically I was really piqued by your interview with Ross Coulthart.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, the revelation about your father and the similarity between the UFOs and all this. And what's really struck me about the whole UFO phenomena is that this is a war over the consciousness of human race. And all these downloads that we keep getting of different sources. I mean, some of them are illuminating and tell us to invent things, and yet other people get downloads that tell them to do not so good things.
Yeah.
You know, and where do these downloads come from? And a lot of the question has been breached. Do these come from a interdimensional source? And are there like camps? Like, is there an agency that's working towards locking down humanity's consciousness, like into a Brave New World type of future? And is there another side trying to free it from that eventuality? What do you think of this possibility?
Well,
and how it relates to what your dad showed you, and also your dad's time in the Freemasons?
So, of course, my dad didn't tell me much about his time in the Freemasons. I went to a couple of what they call ladies' nights, and my in the lodge in Worthing was actually partially built by my grandfather. And so my father obviously got a lot of street cred out of that. I don't know much about the lodge, and in fact, I've almost learnt more since talking about some of these aspects post my father dying than I ever did when he was alive. However, what I did, I also used to say my dad used to speak in parables, or in common phrases. In fact, there was a point in my teenage years where I could literally predict every single thing my father was going to say next in its totality and say it. And I could speak for him for nearly 2 hours. We'd have a conversation. He would just start opening his mouth, and I would then say the next thing he was going to say. And I don't know. And I don't know whether he programmed myself and my other two brothers, because my second oldest brother, Richard, he founded a dance, acid and all kinds of different, high beat music. He was a DJ and worked with a lot of top DJs. And it was called the Standing Wave Project. And that was in the 1990s. And then my eldest brother, Guy, he was always into resonance, it turns out. And he actually created what's called the resonance engine. And it has no hinges or rotating parts. He's got a worldwide patent on it. And so, and then I end up working with resonance. So all three of us totally ended up working in different fields independently, but one is in music, one is in propulsion and mechanical movement, but through resonance, and mine is through matter manipulation through resonance, and that's just a little bit weird. So I don't know whether
they've all converged.
Yeah, well, my younger brother, I think, didn't spend enough time with my father to go down this path. My dad did say to me in a couple of years before he died that he thought that I was suitable to go into the Masons, and I said, Dad, that's not my path, and that's exactly my words. That event that occurred that I recounted, and I think Ross was actually probably the second or third person outside of the family that I'd ever discussed it with, because I'd never really considered it, and I only re-engaged with it because one of the sponsors of the project was asking me to look at the serious disclosure, and they'd done they actually bankrolled a large proportion of the project for the first 3 years that the project was operating. And he kept saying, "You've got to go and see the serious disclosure," and I thought, okay, all right, I don't even know what it is. And then
I remember this story.
Yeah, so essentially, when I met him in Prague, I said, look, I watched the serious disclosure, and I guess I've got to tell you my story. And I didn't realize at that point that my story was different from many other stories out there, but it is almost uniquely different, I guess.
Yeah,
because
very much so.
It isn't a case of an experience for the sake of an experience. This was a planned event that my father knew was going to happen, and he knew when it was over.
Exactly.
And so it's very weird that I'm doing this research, which I knew I would have to do from the age of 4 up to just under my 10th. I knew I would do it in my 40s, and at the conclusion of those 10 years from 40 to 50, towards the end of that. So it was about 2017 or 18 I first revealed it. So it was after my understanding that most of this technology had already been worked out in the 50s and 60s. So that occurred in 2017 into 2018. And I thought, like, do I walk away from this field, or do I continue with it? I said, well, I'm not seeing any of the benefits that this technology can bring. I can only see that they've used it for nefarious purposes.
Right.
Now, when it comes to downloads, I can honestly say that I didn't know that I could remote view. I knew that I was what was traditionally called clairvoyant from a very early age. The first example was I used to be picked up 1 day a week by an aunt, and she used to take us to the toy shop, and he said, you can have whatever you want. It was like very nice aunt. And I always bought this landing craft from Space 1999. It was the
Oh yeah,
you know, the one with the 4 pads, right? And I used
Yes,
to,
the Eagle.
yeah, the Eagle, that's the one. I used to make this model up, and I used to put it on my shelf, and every week it disappeared. And this went on for months. And one time I said,
Leprechaun.
this is not being teleported into space. So I hid in my cupboard, and I'm looking through the crack in the cupboard, and I see my elder and oldest brother come through, and they take it off the shelf, and I followed them down to the end of the garden. And what they were doing is they were putting it up on cables, filling it up with explosives of a radio-controlled thing, and they were doing film effects.
That's great.
Yeah. Anyway,
Wow.
So the point being is that what was my point about the download? So I was with this aunt, and she had she was a diabetic. I didn't even know what diabetic was, but she would inject herself with insulin, and I didn't even know what that was for. But I looked at her toe, and I looked at her, and I got this overwhelming feeling, and I must have been, I don't know, it's 6 or 7 or something. And I said, Auntie, you're going to get gangrene in that toe, and you're going to have it amputated. And I didn't even know what I'm saying. I didn't know what gangrene was. I didn't.
Whoa.
And she says, you don't know what you're talking about. I was a nurse during the Second World War, blah, 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 blah. 2 years later, she got gangrene in that toe and had it amputated. And I've had to learn to deal with the deep responsibility when you get these feelings of whether to talk about it, whether not to talk about it. I've never tried to control it. I've never tried to control it. Now, I get downloads, and the way they manifest is in the middle of the night. There might be some latent problem. It might be a problem that I was exposed to a couple of years before, even 8 years before. I don't know. And I'm lying in the bed. I'm in deep sleep, and suddenly, it's just coming, and my heart starts racing. My temperature goes up, and I go, I've got to get out of bed, and I've got to write it down, or I've got to draw a diagram, whatever it is. And until I've recorded the download, I'm not allowed to go back to sleep. Now, the interesting thing is I have a recording with Alexander Shishkin. Now, he worked at Dubna, and this was in Sochi in 2018. He's one of the very mainstream but very good scientists that work in the field of cold nuclear transmutations and ball lightning. And
oh wow, yeah.
And he's sitting there, and I'm there with the Google Translate and stuff, and I'm there with him for about 3 hours. I think I've got a recording of this somewhere, but he's telling me, Bob, look, you know, I get this information, and I have to share it because it's not mine. I can't do anything. I'm not allowed to profit, and it's exactly how I feel. We were literally like two peas in a pod at that point.
Yeah.
And he has recently sent me 2 Russian books one's an update of the actual book. And I'm going to need to work through it. But like this book is telling very explicitly, and this was sent 2 weeks ago to me, that there are only two negentropy structures in the universe. And they are the tornado and the vortex soliton. So everything that causes life and creation are those 2 things. And it's exactly what we see in our experiments. It's exactly what I see in experiments. This is it. The downloads are real. Now, where are they coming from?
Yes.
The cynic in me says we repeat life over and over again. And the whole of, because there is only so much you can discover, and you have to reset the program. We might be getting the understanding from our former selves. So it's
interesting.
It's not like it's actually coming from a third party. It's coming from our etheric presence telling our current incarnation, this is your job, right? Because I don't understand how my life was completely laid out for me. And, you know, even me saying that to my father, no, it's not my path. I don't even know why I was saying that.
Right,
totally
right.
surreal. It freaks me out that I said that to my own dad. He was offering me like a clean run into the Masons, right?
Right, right. He was
The first thing I
expecting you
could
to
think
say
of
yes.
was, what? Sorry.
He was expecting you to say yes.
Yeah, and I must have I haven't even considered it until this moment. Maybe he was really disappointed that I effectively said no.
Oh, I'm sure he was.
But I know that if I was maybe involved with that, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now, because I've literally realized this thing that is in our face, this Ukanavasara that sits here on our body, this bit that sits here, that bit there, not the Tesla logo, this important structure, the most powerful structure in the universe, this part that affects epsilon zero. Maybe that would be some sort of rite that I have to do in the Masonics, and I won't be able to talk about it, but I can talk about it.
Exactly. That makes perfect sense. I mean, because, like my teacher says, once you're part of the system, you are kind of like are beholding to it.
Yeah. So
But
I don't know. I've been given a certain level of freedom. Thank you for your support. It really makes a huge difference. I said to my wife, like, if I can keep working hard like this, and I don't annoy too many people in the process, but I managed to take the science forward, then we can do something special here. But I might even be able to earn a living by the end of this.
I wish you all the best of luck. You deserve to, sir, because you're doing fantastic work, and I'm really stoked to be able to talk to you today. I actually had I have these ideas and thoughts come to me in between the moments of waking and sleep, when I'm about to fall asleep.
That's
and
it.
I swear, yeah, one night I inexplicably heard loud as day. On two different occasions, I've heard voices. One of them was inexplicably in Spanish. It sounded like someone speaking in Spanish over a megaphone. And it was
It's
completely
not
silent
always
in my
in your
room.
own language. It isn't always in your own language.
Yeah.
But the bizarre thing is, you can understand it.
Yes. Oh, I couldn't understand that. But one instance I did understand was I was falling asleep, and ever present on my mind, you see, I'm studying to be an addiction counselor, is the addiction problem. I live in Portland. And you see, it's always on my mind. And I literally heard a voice shout in my ear, a woman's voice shout, "You have to get them back to base point. You have to get them back to sobriety."
Well, that is a fantastic job for you to be doing, really. I hosted a guy that had he was an alcoholic, and I never really appreciated how that can destroy people's lives until I had to clean up his room, and I can tell you,
oh boy,
he had defecated in takeaway bags. He had filled an entire IKEA bin with urine, and it had 2 inches of mold that was several colors on the top. Rather than come out of his room and go to the toilet, he was basically using the room as a toilet, and there was defecation all over the furniture, all over the walls.
Holy.
Yeah.
Holy shit, literally.
And so, I full respect for you. It's a very honorable thing to do, and to bring spirits back into a centered place where they can, be the best for themselves and the people around them. So thank you.
Well, we're going to get a lot more clients because Portland just took a huge step back. They passed an amendment to Measure 110. We used to have.
I know that because they said that there was a problem with fentanyl, and that they have to kind of take control of that, and so we're rescinding some of the freedom of use laws that they had. Yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not going to really solve the problem. It's going to make it worse from my perspective. But that's another conversation. Thank you so
That's a
much for your
pleasure.
work, Bob.
Yeah, thank you for your comments.
Mm-hmm. Have a great. I'll be enjoying the rest of the conversation. Thank
Okay.
you.
Cheers. William, Bill, do you want to step in again?
Yeah, there was somebody in here who was talking about symbolism, and I wanted to talk about that for just a second.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been doing something new when I see symbols of any kind. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so the first thing I do is I take the symbol and I spin it at high RPM.
Mm-hmm.
And I see where the balance points are, where if it was spinning like a top, it would balance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then I take the shape and I make it into a magnet,
Mm-hmm.
and I magnetize it horizontally, vertically, and depth wise.
Mm-hmm.
And I see what kind of magnet that would make.
Mm-hmm.
Then I try to spin the magnet in my head and see what happens to the field I can't see. Okay. And thinking about symbols like this has made me realize that there's some really special shapes, and they're very special because they're magnets. All right. Now, the one I want to talk about for shortness sake is the Ankh. Okay. If you took an Ankh and you polarized it, so the North Pole was the head of it and the South Pole was the bottom. Okay. What would happen to that magnet? What would happen to that North Pole? And I'm thinking about this because over on Ashton's channel, we're talking about this patent where you take 4 south poles and you put them in, and then you take a fifth and you push it through the center. Okay.
Yeah,
and I'm
so
working on building this with my tube magnets. But what would happen with the Ankh?
Sorry, I don't get what you mean. I can speak to the Boyd Bushman magnetic beam pattern because I reviewed that in quite some depth. Essentially, it causes a net flow of whatever the magnetism is into a direction, and one embodiment has an electromagnet, so you can actually pulse the beam coming out. And using this, there are other embodiments of propulsion systems that use these kind of things in them. There are also systems where they use this for changing the rate of decay of radioactive isotopes. And I was discussing this with my colleague Alan Goldwater, that when you have these so-called magnetic north charge and magnetic south charge, and you have these flux loops between them, I believe that because as I was talking earlier, the magnetic field is so incredibly intense that so there's this pattern where they and I think it is even awarded, but it might be expired now, where they have south north, and they put the radioactive material in the between, and it accelerates the decay. If you have butting, I can't remember whether it's either or one particular, it prevents the rate of decay. So it stops the decay from occurring, right? And so I think part of the reason low energy nuclear reactions are able to remediate nuclear waste is that the material gets pulled in, because typically these things have some spin. They get pulled in and they go into these flux tubes, which have unimaginable levels of magnetic flux, whatever it is, and they immediately decay. So they do what they would do over a very long period of time, but they do it instantaneously. I think that pattern it's the way I've looked at that is it's kind of like a pseudo-magnetic monopole. It's a topological monopole because it's basically just got a bit that sticks out with the beam, but the rest of it is one pole. It's kind of like the primer field bowls, where he has a load of neodymium magnets in a 3D printed bowl, and he ends up by effectively all norths facing outwards and souths facing inwards, or vice versa. And it produces a kind of focused beam. I don't know whether the primer fields guy actually got a patent because, as far as I'm concerned, it's just an extension of Boyd Bushman's prior art. So I don't know how the Ankh. You're saying if you use some of these techniques that you've got in this book to magnetize an Ankh in a certain way, would it produce a magnetic beam? I actually argue.
No.
Okay.
No.
What is it? What are you saying?
Okay, so actually my question's a little bit deeper than that.
Mhm.
So you can magnetize things in different ways, right? Like you can make the head of the Ankh the North Pole.
Mhm.
You could magnetize it so the left side is the North Pole and the right side's the North Pole, or you can magnetize it so the front half of it is the North Pole and the back half of it is the North Pole. You understand?
Mhm.
Okay, so by changing the shape of the magnet, you change the shape of the magnetic field,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we want to make a monopole,
Mhm.
right, a true monopole, then why don't we make it a different shape from the North Pole? You know what I'm saying? Like if you want a South Pole only monopole, then why don't we just make a magnet that's North Pole is a different shape than South Pole? You see what I'm saying? Like we could change the shape of each pole independently to create different effects with the magnetic field around it. So, and
I
this
think-
leads me into my question for you. I have an actual question. Let's say that we magnetize this Ankh with the head north, okay, up and down, right? You would have a bar magnet for the South Pole and a ring magnet for the North Pole, right? What happens to magnets when, if you took the arms of this Ankh and you hooked them up like positive and negative, and you sent current through it, what would happen to the magnetism? And is it possible for us to use shape to make these monopoles instead of, the ways that we're doing it now?
I think the monopole, as such that it is a topological effect, and it's not something you could easily create with physical magnetization of a physical object, because it comes down to, I think, what actual spin is rather than what we imagine it is. It's not necessarily things going around like this. It might be going around like that. And so when you have
Right.
the vectors of the spin, it's a sum total of these things that look like hedgehogs in terms of the
So-
vectors.
I just did an experiment where I ground up a bunch of iron and I put it in vegetable oil and dissolved it put it in a jar, and then I take my real strong magnets of different shapes and I put them up under there, and I can see, what happens to it and stuff. So I know what you mean by that hedgehoggy kind of shape, but if all of the magnetism is these whirlpools, like you're a Kanavasara, what is that? That's the top of the magnetic field.
Well, it's
Okay.
well,
imagine you're
it's a section through it. Actually, it's more like a
Yeah,
mushroom.
well, yeah, but it's that funnel, that hyperbolic funnel. That's what that shape is coming up out of the toroid.
No, it's the phase change. So when you look at, if you go and look at the work of Aalto University on the topological monopole, it's that bit where the phase changes on the top.
So when you talk about spin, isn't that the same as saying there's this circle that goes toward you, there's a circle that comes away from you? Okay. There's also, you could go like this and then turn it right into an up and down, and then you can swing over, and now you're back to this one. Okay.
Honestly,
all
Bill,
of these are connected by a ramstorm shape.
Honestly, Bill.
Okay.
Honestly, Bill, I have to sit and look at a diagram for a lot of time before I
think about nunchucks.
Yes.
Okay, that's how I learned this. That's how that's why I'm, that's where this is coming from, is
So
my nunchucks.
you're going around in a figure of 8 type thing.
So one last thing, and then I'll be done. So when you're swinging the nunchucks, okay, you have like a circle here, and you can go into this other circle here, okay, vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal. You can also swing over here to change your spin.
Yeah.
Okay. All of these paths, okay, when I'm tracing the circle down here,
Mm-hmm.
and then I swing it up and around, and now there's a circle here. See?
Mm-hmm.
Figure 8.
Mm-hmm.
This path in between this circle and this circle is a ram's horn shape. Okay, you know what I mean by that? You know, the ram's horns that
Mm-hmm.
have like the twists to them, and they're
Mm-hmm.
quite
Mm-hmm.
like your shape with the rings and the rings and the rings.
Mm-hmm.
That's a path of least resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a path of least resistance because all of the paths of least resistance are along the edge of a whirlpool. Does that make sense?
It would be the that would be the outcome. Yes.
So if we could just change the shape, couldn't we make those vortexes and then like fractally make more of them on the inside of it? Like if you had an magnetized display, you would have a suction going through it.
I think nature knows how to make these things exactly right, very, very quickly.
I'm saying that that's just a result of the shape and the pool in this vortex fashion. It's the shape that's important.
I get what you're saying, but you have to abstract yourself from what we think an electron is to what it is, and whatever it is, it organizes itself into these structures, these fractal toroidal structures that have whatever is necessary to create these phase singularities and toroidal moments. They have whatever's necessary, and these things are not easy to make in a large man-made thing. They make them themselves. Whatever they have to do, they do, because like when you've got a debate about what an electron is and what spin is and what current is and what magnetism is, when you've got so many parameters that you've got a range, a spectrum of different understandings on what those things are, you're very unlikely to immediately chance upon a macro embodiment by engineering it, whereas nature just makes these things like that. And it's kind of like, why don't you let nature do what it does and just find out how you can nurture that nature to deliver the outcome as soon as possible, which it seems to do. Like, for instance, in Hent's experiment, it produces these things effortlessly and instantaneously. And I mean, it's literally like flicking on a switch. And Ken Shoulder says these are electronic structures built at electronic speeds. I think the
isn't this way that nature makes these, you say it effortlessly makes the shapes. To me, all of these shapes are just the result of funnels that pull into funnels. It's all this pull of positive and negative, where the negative and positive rush toward each other. And they rush toward each other in these lines of least resistance that are the angle between circles.
Maybe, but what do we learn about what do we learn about actually making these things other than see, where I'm coming from is it's less on the philosophical or spatial understanding of specific, because when I can't, I'm not at that quantum level. I'm not at that level of seeing the universe from the inside out. I'm looking at what nature does and how we make nature do what it wants to do. And so
I'm just saying that this is how nature's doing it.
Well, that's great. It might be. It might be.
So, like you said, if we want to make this stuff, we need to know how it works. Well,
no.
Exactly what I'm talking about.
Actually,
better,
you don't need to know precisely how it works.
Mimicking it would be the best, right?
You don't need to know how it. No, like you don't need to know precisely how it works. And what I learned through my education is every time someone told me this is how it works, there was another person that says no, it's different from that. So this is what I'm saying is like, I can get this wrong. I've got this wrong many, many times. Almost certainly I'm wrong now. But what isn't wrong is what nature does. And we are seemingly able to create this thing repeatedly and at will, and it's able to do useful things. So I could spend the rest of my life debating on which theory is what's actually going on underneath, or trying to focus on which knob to twiddle, which helps nature make the things that, and then try and find out what we can do with those things. It is kind of my focus is that, because like you ask people to really understand what a spin actually is, and you know, it's not going around like that, it's going around like that.
But I mean, like, when you take the nunchucks and spin them, they only spin one way. And when you miss, it hurts. So I physically know how these spins and these angles and all of these different circles work. Like, think about it another way. When you spin the nunchuck, there's this
listen,
point.
I get your point. I get your point. Write down how you think that will achieve a better outcome on the things that we're trying to achieve. And the things that we're trying to achieve is the fastest way to make these structures and to manipulate them, to hold them. The biggest thing we would like to know is how, when they're in their completely neutral state, do we easily move them from the neutral state into the non-neutral state? And if they are in the neutral state and we can't move them into the non-neutral state, how we can then contain them. Those are questions that we'd like an answer to, and maybe you can think how your understanding would help, you know, deliver those kind of desirable outcomes. So,
for the record, Bob, we're seeing the same picture.
Yeah,
we just think that different parts of it are important. I think that's all it is.
And my dad said always, it takes all sorts to make a world. You know, I was saying to the other day, even the guy at the end of the bar knows a lot about all the people that come to the bar. You know what I mean? Everyone has value. Everyone has value, and it's where, like, if you've got a particular thing that you know is going to add a positive outcome, and then work towards trying to deliver that positive outcome. And it's like, how is this going to make the end goal come sooner? Which is for us to have more abundant, clean energy. I would like teleportation. I would like anti-gravity, these kind of things. Anyway, I've got to take there's a few hands up here. So thank you for your time, William. And I'm sure we'll be talking more. So actually, Alex, I'll ask you to come in a second, but Kelly asked me first if she could talk, so I'll take Kelly first.
All these guys perked up.
Hi, Kelly.
They all perked up over what I said. They were all off screen. Now they're all on screen. I don't know.
Hold on, I'm gonna. Kelly, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm gonna. Are you on a phone or what?
Yeah, I'm on a mobile.
Okay, that's
okay. Do I need to turn up my volume at all?
No, that's fine. You're perfect, actually.
Hey, I appreciate your time and taking my question. Mm-hmm. You're a gift to humanity.
Well, I'm just doing what I can.
And I appreciate that. A lot of great discussion tonight. My question is going to be in regards to the Windex. To give you just a quick background, I've been working on about the last 10 years in remediation of old mine sites. So I've had a lot of mixtures of minerals. And through that, I've been working with some magnetic technologies. And through discussion with Ken Hutchinson, he directed me to you. And I appreciate that because you've blown my mind. And it's awesome. So
John is a very special person. So, you know, if it wasn't for him, well, for instance, if it wasn't for him actually making this particular sample in 2007, that sample that I'm referring to is, where is it? This one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's actually the part in question. I don't know if you can actually see it. It's right by my nail. This is the fourth order structure that's right by the front of that nail there. It's 1.6 millimeters. It's that little knobble on the end there, and that is the 48 sided structure that allowed me to decode the wheel within the wheel within the wheel. Yeah, go on.
So I've been working with, by chance, rare earths, thorium and cerium and all that. And so when you had your discussion about the Windex, it's spinning, and due to the wind, of course. But you had mentioned something that when it gets down to close to where the funnel opens up, that there's like a frequency to where, and what I was envisioning when you were saying it, it's vibrating and it comes apart. Would that also create a piezoelectric effect, also maybe making paramagnetic materials magnetic for a short time to where they could be captured more efficiently? That would be my question, or your thoughts upon that. I'm not going to take very much more time.
Okay, Kelly. Potentially depends on the material. We're currently using a stainless, so I don't expect it to do that. Certainly the sound in there is very, very important in my view, because the sound sets up ideally resonant nodes, and so there will be a tuning process, which is why we're trying to get the whistle flexible so that we can tune it. And I guess when we hit a particular resonance of the airflow coming in at a particular speed and the size of the nozzle, then the system will start to vibrate as a particular resonance takes hold. And, you know, that might feed into standing waves that are running around the overall complex hydrodynamic structure. Charge separation is what I think's important in there, whether that's injected ions or it's charge separation. I don't know if you saw my presentation in Zurich, where I introduced, thank you to a third party, but mentioning it, but it was the Armstrong electrostatic boiler, where water at extremely high temperature comes through a convoluted path into a nozzle, which then has a Cavitation jet type exit path, and that produces a soliton in the steam that comes out, and it's flashing to steam so fast that it is producing charge separation, which is picked up by some electrodes opposite the output of these nozzles, and it produces 2-foot sparks. So I don't think you need the piezoelectric effect in there, but you do need to have extreme shear and phase change to get the charge separation in there, and then that is organized by this multiple vortex going on.
Because that could be armored up, of course, just like in mining, you would need to have armored plating for the crushing and grinding. But if, in essence, if we were cleaning up sand or close to sand before it went in, just like the demonstrations in, I'm spacing his name, the original inventor of it from Kansas.
Frank Polivka.
Correct. Where he was putting pieces of concrete in and it was just coming out dust. So in my monkey mind, I'm just like, well, I already have dust. And if it's separating, I could, in essence, my thinking, get the sulfur to separate from sulfides, which is a big deal in mining, or in some of my other studies, bismuth does something interesting in a lot of what I've been doing. And so it just, nobody has it. You're the only one that talks about it, and it makes me excited and I want to test more on it. But it does make me wonder, because you said if it takes tungsten apart, I know what tungsten does. I was in the military, what they use it for in that application. And then with my rare earths, which are similar to the sands you got in India, maybe not exactly the same, but all your elements you have, I have too. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe something's there to where we could all be studying this stuff or experimenting on it. That might be able to help humanity from all of our help.
Yeah, I genuinely think we're getting close to solutions for various problems right now, and I think really, in one respect, Victor Schauberger might have been right in that
Yep.
it is about implosion, not explosion. But he, when I've thought of implosion in the terms of Victor Schauberger, I've also thought of something that was a little bit violent, like an imploding bubble. But if you think about these two negentropic processes or structures in nature that I referred to earlier, the vortex, the tornado effectively, and the vortex soliton, which effectively is a tornado wrapped around on itself, if you know what I mean. These are the two things that are able to squeeze matter together and force it to assemble. And it depends on your level of rarefaction. Are you target? Okay, just someone came on with a mic unmuted. So I'm of the belief that in order to interact with whatever the ether is, and I would argue that a large component of the important part of the ether is the relic neutrino condensate. But that aside, you need to create charge separation. Why? Because it's in these magnetohydrodynamic structures that you create the toroidal moment and the Aharonov bomb effect, which is able to create intense magnetic fields, but also a point at which the forces can unite. And the toroidal moment is able to interact with the toroidal moment of, let's say, electrons, but also with the toroidal moment of these relic neutrinos and force them into this reaction zone where the magic can occur, as it were. And so it's totally critical to get the charges separated and then to move them in this toroidal structure. And by having toroid move that way and then you shear it that way, it automatically forms toroids this way. So, like toroids of toroids. So by having the multi-axis shear, you both in the Windex and in the ultra experiments and in the Thunderstorm generator, you're getting the necessary processes going to start interacting with the root of nature, that how it does it. And you're doing it it's literally the same force that's driving life, but it's accelerated. And so, everything that is going on in life, I think, is being driven by these complex vortical structures. Some of the researchers in Russia, they talk about how fossils form, and they're saying that there are these strings of material, but I think actually the strings might be comprised of these collections of these vortex toruses that are in the ether, and when the material comes into the decaying creature or whatever it is forced into the same shape as the original living being, because the ghost of that living being is left in the soil behind. It doesn't get chopped up and moved around. And so the pattern which drove the organization of the matter that became the living structure is there, that drives the organization of the minerals as they come in and form the pattern of the previous living being.
Such as some of the giants that look like stone, maybe.
Yeah, so like there really
I don't want
wasn't.
to go off rail. Yeah.
No, but whatever. That I don't have a problem with. My neighbor is ridiculously tall. I mean, he's the tallest guy I've ever known. He's absurdly tall, and it doesn't spook me to think that in past times, maybe with different diets or different circumstances, there were people that were larger. or even if someone was to use this technology to come here and they actually came from a lower gravity environment, but they were very physically strong, or they were mechanically assisted, their bone frames were large, because I've said this argument before. Apparently 900 million years ago, the Earth's day was 19.2 hours because the Earth was physically smaller, because it had condensed less of this rarefied material from the cosmos. 200 million years ago, it's 21 hours, and now it's 24 hours and getting longer, because it continuously is absorbing and condensing into ordinary matter this very rarefied matter from the cosmos. And so if dinosaurs were bigger because they used the same material, but they actually literally weighed less, so they could have longer bones. So if you're if you were born on a lower gravity planet, you're the same pattern that drives your structure in our physical bodies could actually grow to a bigger body. And when if we were coming to Earth, then you would end up in a situation where you might need some support for, like, even an anti-gravity device around you. But if you died, you would actually have the calcium, the bones of the scale of the giant, and then the same thing would occur, because the overall, let's call them plasmoids, but the overall structures, because I want to do a video on this, because actually Tony Gibboni analyzed the structure that I've, the monkey code, the magnetohydrodynamic structure, and he's seen, and I will do a video on this, but basically between the point of construction and the yin yang and the point of destruction on the structure, it is the golden ratio between various parts of the structure. And that actually might account for why you have the golden ratio here, and the golden ratio here, and the golden ratio here, and the golden ratio, because with each part of this, there is a structure in the ether that set the limits to which this could grow, and that's true for the whole human body. That I talk about the face a lot, but I think every aspect of the human body is a reflection of the program that runs the universe. And so I want to do a whole Ode presentation on this.
We are an image of the creator, and I mean, you're right, sir. And that's one reason I just love your talks and your knowledge on so much, because you bring a perspective that
I actually have learned
nature, and you're showing it to us, like Victor Schomburg, like anybody else. We're all rediscovering this stuff again.
Yeah. It's only rediscovering, it's only realization. I have new respect for I'm continuously amazed when I go around museums and I just see, like, all of these people knew it. It must have been like everyone was talking about it, and I just don't know what happened. It's not even in the ancient history, just in the recent history. I don't know what happened to shut all this knowledge down from general conversation, because it must have been in general conversation, at least at certain levels of society.
I love it right now. I think it's amazing how there's so many just people that are discussing this, and we're all trying to come together to fix all of our situations. This is how we get out of it, is together. Hey, real quick, that came to mind when you were discussing about the Windex and how it's going.
Mm-hmm.
With my specific mix, not to go into detail, I've ICP-MS'd my concentrates of what I've been able to collect of value and stuff. And I can, like a recipe, mix certain things in chemistry to try to bring. And that led me to what isotopes and all that. Well, one of my, I guess, I don't know if it's an aha moment or what your thoughts are. I've been using my foundry or furnace to spin the flame to get up to my temperature. And with my bismuth, which seems to be a real interesting transition metal of, I have no idea, but it's cool, that when I get my temperature up to 2300 degrees Fahrenheit and I bump it up to 2350, my bubbling effect acts differently. And it almost, to me, seems similar to some of your experience of like a low nuclear reaction, but I don't know how that is, or if I'm even right in that. But my gold percentage goes up when I do that. Almost like the isotope has extra neutrons, right? That somehow that low heat, which is weird, is creating that torsion effect within the mix. Maybe to these elements are able to alchemize or change, or maybe because bismuth's there, it is able to. Your thoughts, and then
Well, I don't know what you've got in your mix, but if you go to the reaction calculator at nanosoft.co.nz and you look at the reactions that produce gold, the elements that they used in alchemy in the past were, saltpeter. They used calcium and potassium, and they used bismuth, mercury, or which I think was called quicksilver or something.
Correct. Yes.
And lead. They didn't use thallium, which is good because it's so toxic. But they probably did have it in some of the mixes without knowing it. But bismuth and lead and mercury, doesn't matter which one, either calcium or potassium is in the top 3 for the most likely, in my view, to produce the most energy out, which is what you would get when you are you have an optimal system. It does produce a range of elements, but if you could get it into some form of resonance and have the right recipe, that is the right thermal domain, the right vibrational modes going on, which obviously there's one thing that the fastest way to change any system is to change its temperature, because it changes almost all of the parameters at the same time, right?
Yeah, it does it at that 2300. Most of the gold guys are all down because they're not dealing with all the mix I am, and I'm kind of like, well, wait a second. If I got all this stuff, how can I get it separated for one? But when I do have it to a moment where I need to get something of value out of it, I found, like, I don't want to say I'm a philosopher's stone or alchemy. I don't even know if I'm right. Yeah. But holy crap, there's something going on, and I'm not wondering.
There will be a resonant temperature, and because like whatever the process is going on, temperature itself will change. Because it's a vibration of the actual atoms. It's phonons in the atoms, and
I have palladium-3 is what my main palladium-3, and I figure I can catch it magnetically, which is really weird because palladium's paramagnetic. But at a certain temperature, it's weird. It actually catches to a magnet, which is interesting. But I found it enough of abundance where people that were looking at my test results were like, "You're full of crap." And I'm like, I don't know all I know is it's working. And I don't know how to, other than when you talked about the spin, right? Especially with the whistles and the Windex, right? You got to have at least 2, right? And maybe I have to add some other nozzles. I haven't tried that. Fun's one thing, right? But like, I'm almost wondering, like what you're saying is with the way it moves, right? And having that right resonance, which maybe with a flame is different than with just wind, right? But that would work, and it would be
keep exploring and make a very good logbook. I would argue video your experiments if you can, because the number of times I come back to a video and I realize something I didn't realize before, and there's no logbook in the world that would have been able to record it. Get yourself a nice hard drive, even if you just record with the webcam what you're doing, and as you're doing it, now I'm changing this parameter, now I'm changing this parameter, because you don't want to be that person that finds the secret sauce recipe, and then you can't remember which of the parameters you changed.
I appreciate it.
It's it's like having a nice cryptocurrency wallet and then forgetting the password.
Luckily for me in that situation, it hasn't happened.
It happened to me back in the day. I mined a lot of Litecoin with my animation farm when it was quiet in India, and I promptly forgot the password.
There's a company that supposedly can help you retrieve that for a fee.
No, I've tried a lot of stuff, but Anyway,
Thank you, sir. I
it's
really
a pleasure.
appreciate your
Yeah.
time.
Cheers, Kelly. Good luck with
Cheers.
everything.
Take care. Thank you.
Okay, so Alex, you're next on the list. Oh,
Hey, Bob.
Larman,
Good to see you.
you jumped in, so let's have please or questions. Hi, Larman.
This is Alex.
Oh, it is Alex.
Alex
Sorry.
is there. You can speak.
Yeah, go on. Yeah, hi, Alex.
Did I step on someone? I'll back
No,
up.
you were next up. You were next up. Go on.
Yeah, I just thought something had occurred to me kind of in a download a while ago apropos of the Windex, and I thought I'd share it. Maybe give you guys some other knobs to twiddle.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of, speaking of what William was bringing up with these old Navy tech manuals or military tech manuals, there's a way of evacuating spaces in ships called an inductor. And it's basically like those Dyson ring fans that you see. And they use ship's HP air coming through angled nozzles to draw the air out through a venturi. And it'll move water, and you could actually, people have been killed by inadvertently evacuating spaces with that. And it occurred to me that to get the air movement in your Windex, maybe you can build something like these and extend them from the side. And I would think the shape should be the Sothic triangle.
Maybe
that's probably the optimum shape for the venturi. And even within the venturi, you could put 3 jets and have them at whatever this optimal angle is. And if you line them along the side, and maybe you can make them adjustable so you can rotate them on their feed axis. You're feeding the air through from the wall of the Windex, so that you could adjust the angle so that they could impart a little bit of a downward or upward spin on the air as it goes through, in hopes of getting that toroid, that D4D working on the inside. That's that was my thought. And then further along with it, I thought, maybe how these guys cut these stones in the old days, you could make something like that and drive it with a high pressure steam. So you really wouldn't need anything too exotic. And you're getting into the, the thermionic emission or whatever's going on in that boiler you keep talking about, which I definitely need to pull the string on that. But it's just something that occurred to me. And then, if you set up the strong enough disruption zone down at the bottom, that's what you cut the stone with, right?
Well, I mean, they certainly use high pressure water jets to cut through steel these days, so why not cutting through stone? And if you can set it up like a Cavijet as well, that's 4 times more impact punch for the pressure that's coming in. Now, is the pressure is that going to work as effectively when it's actually steam? Possibly.
Well, I mean, I'm not talking about cutting with the steam. I'm talking about using the high pressure steam to try and create this vortex inside where you get a disruption zone at the bottom. Like you've shown on the Tesla towers and the O-Day thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we're trying to go for. So we're because of Tony's challenges over the winter period, those things were put on pause. But he's back on the case right now. So why don't you write down or maybe sketch up your ideas, and I'll post them or get them to Tony and Henk because they're the most likely to be taking that forward in the short term. Yeah.
What's the best way to get a hold of you or to send that stuff?
Send me a direct message on remoteview.icu and I'll reply back with an email you can directly send it to.
Okay, and by the way, if you haven't guessed, I'm the Taco Loco guy on Twitter.
Okay, great.
Just always tagging MFMP.
Awesome.
But and then the other thing that's interesting, if somebody's out there wanting to like really go down some weird rabbit holes, is I've been listening to Al Bielek and Preston Nichols' old like ancient videos.
Is this the guy that was on the?
Stuff.
Was he the guy that was supposedly on the Philadelphia experiment?
Philadelphia and Montauk. And my background, let's just put it this way, is sufficiently aligned that I understand what he's saying. And I mean, very much of what that guy, either he's the most amazing fabulist in the world, or it's mind blowing. But I mean, I think it's really there, and it fit every time I listen to it. It fits. You know, we're talking about toroidal moment. They talk about pointing.
I
using
don't
tubes
know anything about what he's ever said. I only read it, and the reason I read it 3 days ago that he was involved. No, in fact, I read it yesterday because that was one of the candidate presentations I was going to give today. So instead of what we're doing now, I would actually, if you can get the links to the videos that you're referring to, because I've seen something that Tesla did in the 1880s. And I think when you understand that, you can understand what led him to make the Wardenclyffe Tower, and you can understand how that would lead through to potentially how I envisaged firstly, how they thought it would make the ship disappear, either from radar, because radar is an electromagnetic wave, and we know these things can effectively absorb the incoming anything. So if you have this coherent matter, normally your electromagnetic wave comes in, it bounces off, a piece of metal on your ship. But if you have the non-radiating boundary, the coherent matter structure on the outside, and the electromagnetic wave comes in, it would just get absorbed. There's no reflection. So it basically is like there's nothing there. Okay. And then if you drive that even further, it all light goes in one side and comes out the other side. And then if you go further with the toroidal moment, I think if you spin it up further, the thing will literally shift in space-time.
Yeah, I mean, they get deep into it and it's making sense in my head. I mean, I can kind of see these things in my head. He talks about
here's the thing. This is part of the things that I was going to discuss tonight if that was the presentation that I would have presented. When you look at our structures, parts of the structure, there is shifting of material, and other parts there's no shifting of material. And I think that if we are to believe what occurred with some of the seamen there, where they either shifted from one deck to another deck, or another person, was found. That guy that shifted from one deck to the other deck, apparently he had his arm still stuck in the previous deck. He'd gone. And when you see these samples from John Hutchison, and then you hear these things from which I need to do the translation by Leonid Oritsky, which he's talking about these extremely weird things that happened in Chernobyl that's not public anywhere, but he talked about
like
it.
That helicopter too.
Yeah, but no, but I'm talking about the things where these brittle graphite blocks somehow came out of the reactor, but they had a 200-ton steel thing on the top. How did that happen? And they're not even broken. And then these pieces of metal intersecting like that, and he's talking about these chunks of the reactor that have got through a gap, and it's impossible. And he's basically suggesting they teleported. So I think what happened at that reactor was something similar, but by accident, that happened and I think they genuinely were. I was going to go into a lot of detail with this, but anyway, and I will do it at a separate time with respect to this 1880s patent of Tesla. And how I think we might be able to, I mean, it's just weird. We might actually be able to create localized time distortion and almost possibly localized teleportation, or at least shifting in location of space-time. So I don't know. It's getting a bit weird, really, because I never expected these things to connect.
It gets very weird when you watch the rest of those videos. But,
all right, so I've never seen any of the videos.
Yeah.
I just read his name.
Blank.
I read his name, and I read it. If you go to the Wikipedia articles, I just followed 2 Wikipedia articles. I followed one to the Philadelphia experiment because I thought, oh my God, I was literally running. In fact, it was last night. I was running around the house, and I was saying, Kim, I have no idea how I'm going to share this with the community, because this is just. Even this blows my mind, and I've had a lot of things blow my mind recently. But I've got a thread from how Tesla went from this to that, and so he must have been involved with Philadelphia experiment. And when
according to these guys, he led it. and then he actually sabotaged it before the unfortunate test because he knew something like that was going to happen because they were using a toroidal field rather than an egg-shaped field, which came later. And supposedly von Neumann figured out how to do that. I mean, it's a long.
All right, I
sidetrack.
clearly
You
clearly have to listen to this because I've clean roomed this. Like I say, I was gonna present it. I didn't even know there was videos of him talking out there.
I'm gonna warn you, but I mean, I think you're open-minded enough, you know, given some of the things you said, and you know, we both know, it gets cray banana pants later on. I mean, but still, like when they start talking about the technology and the tubes and a lot of specific little innocent stuff about the ships, it's exactly right. And
I'm just concerned because
I'll reach out to you and send you some stuff. But don't Wikipedia and all the surface level stuff you're going to find usually is pounded down, or they'll say, "Oh yeah, this has been discredited," and or ignore whole swaths.
Oh,
of stuff.
I know it's in
like
there, but here's my problem. I don't know what to think about that, but I literally went from reading this patent yesterday. I think it was even yesterday or the day before, and I think it was yesterday. And last night I was walking around and go, "Oh my God, we can teleport stuff." I was in shock.
The only other thing I'll add to that, and then I'll get off, is I think some of this has to do with a lot of what Roy J. Herbert's been saying about the time thing, and you may need to like re-examine your thoughts about time. Well, I mean, I have, and when you hear they talk about a time field and like a T2 vector that they mooch over, and that's what actually affects the visibility. And if you go too far, that's when you teleport or other things happen.
No. See, these boundaries, you have your locking in your space. You're basically quantum locked wherever you are, right? So like you're sat on that park bench or whatever with that railing behind you, and you're effectively quantum locked in that space-time, right? But if you push this structure too hard, you literally snap to a different node, but it's a node on a different dimensional level. And yeah, honestly, I was totally shocked last night, and my kids are going. They get all so excited because they know when I'm like this, and and they go, "Oh, so you can," because my son was playing a computer game. He says, "You can teleport us now." I said, "It's already been done. It's not like I'm inventing anything new."
According to these guys, it's been done.
Yeah,
I mean, it's been very done.
Yeah.
So
but
you can judge for yourself. I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, it's as far as I'm concerned, it can be done, and I think we're not far off from being able to do it, and it's just shocking. It's just shocking.
It's funny that we're both kind of coming on this at the same time. It's a synchronicity. I mean,
yeah, but
I
like
find myself coming up.
when you understand that you have that non-radiating boundary, and I've described how you can fire a missile at it and it'll be consumed one atom at a time. Even in Cyril Chukhanov's work, he's talking about the macro quantum object, and he's trying to push a metal bar in, and it's not able to go in. And if he fires light on one side, it goes round the structure and comes out the other side. So like it's basically like a single electron, except it's this big or whatever. So effectively, what you're creating is you've got your ship inside this bubble, and the radar. So I can understand that basically the same thing occurred, but to a lesser degree with the 3M tape. They had some film, and it was going over some rollers. But when you look at it, you've got a roller going one way, and you've got a roller going the other way, and you've got vast amounts of static electricity. The same kind of thing happened there, but to a lesser degree. And so they're trying to create this boundary which either directly absorbs or passes the light from the radar over to the other side. And they would have been able to realize that quite early on, because they would have had mock-ups in the lab, and they would have shot. And what Tesla was doing in the 1880s was something mechanical, but I believe it would have achieved the same effect. It would have achieved, if you span it fast enough, it would have achieved the same effect. And the logic process Tesla would have gone through was we don't want mechanical, we just want to do this with electrodynamics, and then that came in the whole magnetohydrodynamics, and then once you've got this structure, it produces this, and he must have gone, oh, that's what's in the churches that my dad was a priest in. Now I understand what was on all those gravestones back in Slobjan or whatever it is in Slovenia or Croatia now or whatever. And it must have been, he must have gone through this traumatic self-realization of realizing what happened and what was known about by the ancient peoples in that Macedonian sort of mountainous region where all the giants lived. And so he had that head start on everyone else because he was so much more connected to the prior understanding of this technology. But it's really simple. It's just really simple. Of course, the devil's in the detail, and like having your seamen find themselves halfway in a ship and halfway out of a ship is not a good plan. I mean, I read some reports that some people were rematerialized, but they were inside out, which is, and you can see how that would occur by just looking at our ultra experiments. Some parts of the ultra experiment, literally nothing occurs at all. And you go across an event horizon and it's moved in space-time to a different place when it rematerializes. In other parts, it's all churned up and literally torn apart. So what happened in that ship, in my view, when they got the magnetohydrodynamic structure working, it's manipulating the structure, the fabric of space around it. So the nodes on which those previous atoms were quantum locked have shifted into another node where there's already atoms. You understand?
Yep.
And
they're nudged. Yeah.
It's just the logical consequence, and it's so clear to me now. And it's just like, oh my God, we can do this. But as I've said since 2017, Jesus said, the meek shall inherit the earth, but the meek was from praus, which is the Greek, and it's basically those that know that they have great power but choose not to use it will inherit the earth. And it's a constant thing I have to deal with. Is like, is it the right thing? Is it the right thing? Because it is literally able to manipulate space-time. And I'm sure this is what was it, Khrushchev, and
they're already using it. I mean, we have to get
and
this
that
out.
is the point, and it is the important message here, to make people aware of what is actually being used against us to manipulate us.
I mean, MH300, 9/11. It sounds trite, but it's true. We all know it here that get this, and so hand wringing over. Oh my God, we got to keep it secret. From who? What? I mean, are they going to do worse? I mean. Maybe to distract us on the way.
Well, they could certainly do a fake alien invasion.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what they'll try. Once they've used up all the old weapons in some phony contrived wars, which are genuinely causing death.
The other side of the Philadelphia experiment, which you're going to find out, is the Montauk connection.
These structures change time. Specifically, they freeze time. They freeze time. Yeah.
But the other side is the Montauk part, and that's the mind control thing, which speaks to why this stuff has been suppressed and how it's been suppressed for so long. So,
so if it's mind control, it's the same structure. It's the same structure. This is literally the freaking keys to the God's toolbox. It is.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to take Doug.
It scares me. Anyway, I'll let you. I'm done.
All right, cheers, Alex. Please send me those videos. I'm almost
good.
Scared to watch them now because I'm just going to go, oh yeah, oh dear. All right, cheers, mate.
I'll hit you up tomorrow. Thanks,
cool.
Bob, for all you
Cheers,
do.
Alex.
You've been a wonderful catalyst.
All right, thanks. Okay, so Doug, you're up.
Thanks, Bob. And I'm sorry I joined over 2 hours late, so I may have some comments that have already been touched on.
That's
but
okay. Yeah.
Couple things quickly. I have a question, but before I get to that, you piqued my interest about this talk about teleportation. About
a few months ago, about 8 months ago, I actually from a comment on remoteview.icu, I happened to look at a website belonging to an archaeologist. I think he's retired now, but for 30 years he was on the staff, archaeology department staff at the University of Graz, which is just less than 100 miles from you. Graz in Austria.
It's about four. It's a little more than that. It's about 3 or 4 hours drive. Yeah.
And just before I go too far, do you read German fluently?
I don't. No. I have Yin Gazda, who speaks perfect English and perfect German, and she lives in Vienna, which is between me and Graz.
Well, so anyway, so the website of Professor Heinrich Kusch, the last name is Kusch, Heinrich Kusch. He's a legitimate professor of archaeology specializing in cave and tunnel and underground.
Oh, is this these structures they found out all through Austria?
Exactly. They're all through. They're throughout.
And you've got these toroidal structures where they don't seem like they're storing anything, but they're using quartz and stuff.
Yes. Yeah. There are several types of associated structures. There is a toroidal structure, but very particularly built, obviously carefully engineered, and very old. He's carried out age dating techniques. Not carbon 14, obviously, but dating on the assumption that some of the stonework that's found inside these toroidal structures and associated tunnel structures.
I saw on some of the tunnel structures they had these glassy-like walls with these little round holes. Yeah,
exactly. So all these tunnels were obviously built with the same sort of tools, and it's not. People casually say, "Oh, you look at the chisel marks," but nobody could manually operate a chisel to create, 60 feet of.
Yeah, because he used a laser scanner, didn't he? And he found that there's very small deviation.
Orientation, right?
Yeah.
Plus, these so-called chisel marks are like 20 centimeters long and almost they parallel. Yeah, it's some special kind of chisel, all right. But anyway, so he studied as an archaeologist specializing in caves and tunnels and mines and so on, both natural and artificial, for 30 years. He became aware of these structures throughout his region, and anyway, so in around 2005, he published a book about these mysterious structures. In Austrian German, they're called Schrattel or Erdstelle, which means stables in the earth. But basically, they have these names because they're obviously built to a plan, very carefully engineered, and they have absolutely no intelligible intended purpose. So, in fact, in archaeology, the definition of an Erdstall, or in English, they're called souterrains. In French, they're called souterrain annulaire. It's all the same thing from Ireland and Scotland and Wales to, throughout Brittany. And anyway, they're across Europe. They're the same sort of structures. You see the same tool marks everywhere. Anyway, so Dr. Kusch finally published a book about these mysterious structures around 2005. A few months after he published this book, he received some information that led to him publishing a second book. And after he published that, sometime around the publication of the second book in 2010 or 12, he was contacted by an archivist from a church archive in Austria. So this archivist was a religious person, a monk, I guess, who had worked for 30 or 40 years in a certain archive that has documents going back to the early Middle Ages, you know, to the 1100s, 1200s, and so on, all the way up to the present. And he said, you know, you publish this book about these mysterious structures. I know exactly what these structures are. They are extensively documented and described as to their location, type, purpose, mode of utilization, and they are indeed a very ancient teleportation network. In the church archives, and incidentally also in the official archives of the noble families of Austria, these structures are described, and their care, maintenance, and upkeep and operation is described. And so this archivist, whom he names in his book, gave him access to certain documents from the church archives, which describe in matter-of-factly that these stone structures make up a energetic teleportation network, which is described as such, you know, in the church and the noble family archives. They were, as you suspected, they were in common use up until near the end of the 16th century. In fact, it was in 1580 that they began disabling, breaking, and where possible, filling in these structures that were all over the Austrian countryside and had been used for centuries or since time immemorial by some of the local people who were employed by the princes, you know, the local land barons and landlords. They controlled these things, but they were known to quite a few of the local people who were employed to take, you know, goods that were transported all around Europe routinely, you know, in this transportation system. And according to this informant and documents that he produced, there was some kind of a exopolitical crisis that occurred in the 16th century, starting in 1505, 1510, 1520. There was a series of exopolitical conflicts that were escalating and becoming worse. And it was conflicts with other users, other terrestrial, mostly terrestrial users of this teleportation network that sort of got into an escalating conflict with some of the human users across Europe, which led to them disabling and shutting down most of them on an emergency basis. So that's his story, and he's sticking to it. This informant said that he had personally found a couple of working teleportation chambers. They work in pairs. They're very simple. They are arranged in pairs, like one transmission chamber goes to one tuned receiving chamber. They are powered by telluric currents from the ley lines, which are related to deep fractures in the granite shields of the continents and the energies that flow along them. And basically this informant, this archivist, had tracked down a couple of working chambers and had tested them and then personally used them. And there were several other people
So this was the guy that worked within the church doing the ancient document archiving.
Right. He testified that he personally had used them, and he offered all this documentation to this archaeologist, Heinrich Kusch, who then published some of it in his third book. These are all in German. The publisher, obviously, gets constant requests to publish in English, but the publisher would only publish in German. After the third book was published, many of his archaeological sites were then taken over by a mining surveying company from Germany who said, so Kush would then go to some of his sites and find they're taken over with official permission from the Austrian government, and he can't approach them, and no one can approach them for the time being. So a region-wide a series of various scanning and sounding equipment of the sort used to make underground surveys for mining.
Right. So they're trying to see if what you see in the bits you can access are all of it, or whether there's something more to the structures.
Somebody hired this German underground surveying company for hundreds of millions of dollars. So Kush, when he went and talked to some of the engineers on site, said, yes, we're from a German company, and yes, we have this contract. This is going to go on for 10 months. And by the way, all our data has to be encrypted on site, and it's actually being sent to NASA in the USA. So basically, the story that seems to be true is that after Kush published these secrets, NASA then paid hundreds of millions of dollars for a complete underground survey of the area. Of course, NASA is really into mining in that region of southern Austria.
Well,
so anyway, the books are quite convincing. I've listened to hours and hours of the author being interviewed on a radio station, and by the way, this network occurs right in your neighborhood. It's right through Czechia and Hungary and Romania.
I can tell you there's a very large number of tunnels under the town that I'm currently in. There is a 36 kilometers of tunnels under the Zunoimo, which is about an hour away. And interestingly, those tunnels were separated into 3 units. You had the tradespeople. They had one complete tunnel system which did not interact with the clergy. The clergy had their own tunnel system, right, that did not interact with the tradespeople. And then thirdly, all of the houses had their own tunnel system. And none of these 3 tunnel systems interacted with each other.
It's similar, similar in Austria. But the mysterious tunnels that have been related to an energetic transportation system that was used historically for hundreds of years and was shut down on an emergency basis at the turn of the 16th to the 17th century. Some of it is still working, and according to his informants, some of the major the stations, the local stations across the countryside are very simple. They're operated acoustically by certain patterns of notes that can be sung if you master the singing technique of singing 2 notes at once, or you can have a flute made with 2 pipes.
So anyway, you're looking to get a beat frequency.
Yeah, but basically you have to sound 2 notes of certain pitches in a certain pattern and just keep doing it. The acoustic resonance builds up either in the chamber or the section of tunnel. So all these tunnels to nowhere, they are carefully divided into resonant sections.
Right. Yeah.
And carefully tuned with these scallops that are cut out of the wall. Tuning scallops, which tune sections of the tunnel, and certain sections are transportation or are sending. They will encapsulate. My take on it after hearing your theories is they're being encapsulated in some kind of membrane around a toroidal fractal moment. They are being essentially shrunk down to atomic size without destroying the structure inside. They're slipped along these ley lines.
I think it would be as simple as this. What it's doing is you're energizing the packet, but there's only one place it can go to, which is the matched pair.
Right.
And it just immediately appears there. Like when you get it right, you dematerialized in one point, and you complete, and all you're doing is you're changing your space-time reference. Yeah, and it's rather than when you physically move, like I'm moving my finger, and every atom in my finger is moving to different nodes in the grid, right? What you're doing is you're getting this macro atom, and you're moving it on its space-time geometry to the next node, which is over here. And all it's done is it's done what each atom in your body is doing. It's the quantization here is 1 Planck's distance, but for this bubble that's created, the next quantization is this place over here. And it's almost, it would probably be such that the energy that you give it to create the structure, as soon as it's moved, it's not sufficient to persist, and you just appear at the other place.
Well, it's very, this seems to be very real in use up to the present here and there, and carefully controlled ways. But Kush paid for extremely accurate age dating by a method which dates the surface of a rock, how long a rock has been buried. So basically, if you have a slab that's been quarried someplace, shaped, transported, and used to build one of these chambers, the assumption is that it's been buried several meters deep in the earth and has not been exposed to the sun since it was made, right? So when you date these certain slabs that have been brought from elsewhere and put into these structures, they date anywhere from 10,000 back to 20,000 years ago. And they have been repaired continuously many of them up until the 1500s. In other words, you see repair work, and where do you see the repair work? At the entrance to the tunnels, which have been exposed to weathering for thousands of years. The inner part, that's the energetic part, the tuned part, is 10, 12, 15, 20,000 years old, but the entrances to these places have been repaired continuously for thousands of years up to the present.
Which shows continuous importance in the culture.
Exactly. They were in common use until the late 1500s. And the way they, according to the church and the noble people and the local people, by the way, Kush eventually interviewed some of their local families and got them to talk, because they have these things under their houses in their farmsteads. What they said was this: when the church, the church and the land barons, the nobility, decided that to meet this crisis, not only must they disable and bury at great expense most of these things, but it was necessary to suppress the common people's knowledge of them.
Right. Yeah.
That was the purpose of the sudden wave of witch trials across Europe in the late 16th and early 17th centuries. People who knew about and used this system to teleport, they could easily find hundreds of witnesses who could swear that, Joachim was conducting business over here at this hour of prayer.
Yeah.
And seen conducting business or going into a tavern, someplace 60 miles away, an hour later. He only could have gotten between the two places.
We know what he did.
Witchcraft, and they were tortured, killed, and that really encouraged, after they killed a few tens of thousands or a few thousands of people like this, it really encouraged the other people not to pass on to their children what they knew about this.
Right. I'm going to share something with you, which I took a few days ago in the Natural History Museum in Prague. And I'm going to ask you if any of these structures look a bit like this.
Yes.
Right. I know they do, but you speaking...
Not quite as elaborate and formalized, but they're like a part of that picture.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, from what I recall from the one video I saw on the subject, there was a long tunnel coming in, a round circle structure, and it had a round thing going around the outside.
Right. It's a series of tuned sections of tunnel that
Now,
some-
I'm
somebody's
gonna show you
using.
the top of this box, and just to let you know that this box is from Duke Frederick from 1189 in Prague. Right, so this is nearly 850 years ago. This is the top of the box,
Mhm.
and this is a box that you would travel with.
Huh.
A vortex and an anti-vortex, they are your pair. You're going from one place to another. It's exactly what happens in the magnetic monopole. You've got a vortex over here and an anti-vortex. This is what's in that 3rd century BC structure that thing that I showed in my presentation in Poland last year, the breastplate thing, where you had a vortex going one way and a vortex going the other way. I think it has to be only in pairs.
Yeah, and the technology I've been describing, that's described by Professor Heinrich Kusch, is obviously Stone Age. It's literally Stone Age. It's literally.
Oh yeah.
But there must be obviously more up to date and fancier ways. Like some of the most simple ones, they're just tuned for one thing, and that's where you go, or that's where you come.
The way
But there
I'm
were some
reading this.
chambers that were tunable.
The way I'm reading this is the
move
bubble.
certain things around and tune them differently.
This is the bubble, and it's going from point A to point B.
Well, anyway, I just wanted to share that because I'm convinced that Kusch is legitimate. Everything checks out. That his sources are legitimate, and that this is real. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is real, and I think it is very simple. Sound is the key. We know that in our experiments we have vibration, and we get 2 nodes, and suddenly something goes from this side to that side. In the outside of the inside and the inside of the outside on the Thunderstorm generator, material is taken from here. It then ends up over here.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is you're somehow completely understanding this process at a fundamental level. You're realizing that it is scale invariant, and you're using it. And it's like, maybe this is what the mind is doing when it's remote viewing. The actual conscious part of your mind is able to leap between areas of space-time.
Well, anyway, thanks for the opportunity to share it.
And that's really nice. And I think for everyone listening, I think you did a fantastic job at getting that across. Really.
I'll send the link to Kusch's website, even without German. It has amazing pictures. And just one last question. I won't speak. I'll just ask a question. Are there any updates on Paul Pantone's GEAT technology? Because I really enjoyed the conversation with Dan Easton, but I haven't heard anything further.
Unfortunately, Dan has not come through with anything on that. We have explored it, but what happened was in fact, as far as I understand it, maybe even today, Henk has created a nozzle to force a vortex, because he actually made a glass GEAT, or he acquired a glass GEAT from some experienced GEAT builders that don't want to go public in Holland. He was seeing that there was moisture tracks and they were going in a straight line. There was no vortical nature to it. So he's actually, I think maybe even today, he's done to a degree what Malcolm's doing and added a thing to start the vortex going. I'll have to catch up with him. So he's the only one that's actively working on that, to the best of my knowledge, right now. But we're all basically waiting for the Thunderstorm generator, because the Thunderstorm generator seems to do what the GEAT did, but it seems to just do it straight away. Like there's no complicated, difficult thing to get it working, if you know what I mean. And we will find out whether that's true when we get our hands on them ourselves. So thanks, Doug. I actually really enjoyed your talking there. Like I said, I've experienced a little bit about it, but when you were talking about it then, and this is one of those kind of weird spiritual moments for me, like why you need to do more talking and not less talking. And I saw this on this 1130. This is 850 years old, and it's a travel box made in leather and metal, and they literally have one of these plans for these teleportation units on it. you couldn't make it up. All right, thank you. Right, does anyone else want to jump in on Zoom? If not, I'm going to see if there's any comments on Skype. It's not Skype, on YouTube. They might actually be having their own conversation over there. Thanks for listening. If you've got any questions on YouTube, ask them now. I'll see if I can see anything with a Q above. If anyone else wants to ask anything. Okay, so we've got someone here. Okay, Lithnik, I will ask you to unmute and you can fire away.
Okay, it's a bit off topic.
Go on.
I'm also a bit interested in paranormal and stuff, and I've been I heard some talk about that there's seems to be a lot more paranormal activity, where there's large clusters of limestone or quartz or flowing water underground. Now, is that because there's an accumulation of relic neutrinos or something, or do you have any ideas of why that is?
So, where you have quartz, you're going to have some piezoelectric effect. This would lead to some static charge potentially building up. These clusters seem to bind to oxygen and paramagnetic materials. If the oxygen is dissolved into the water, then it would bind to that. And when you've got a flow of that, you get almost like a magnetic current, but you also got a resource for that. In the work of Alexander Parkhomov, he points to in his 4th chapter when he was investigating paranormal effects in Space Earth Human, that the dowsing process for looking for metals and the dowsing process for looking for water underground may be due to this kind of relic neutrino flux and the way that it interacts with both metals and water. Paranormal is just basically outside of the normal. That whole 4th chapter of Space Earth Human is effectively dealing with paranormal observations. So yeah, I would suggest that wherever you have an increased concentration of these things, and of course water flowing through rocks can also cause cavitation, and that can generate locally relic neutrinos. And if it's intense enough, you might maybe get some oxygen produced as well. So potentially, yes, I would expect that you would see paranormal things. Now, what paranormal things? Well, let's say you've got some either seen or unseen ball lightning type effects. They can do paranormal type things. They can move things around, as you've seen in the recent video coming out of the Russian group. They can cause things to shift around, or even buildings to start coming apart. So yeah, is that the kind of thing you were thinking about, or?
Well, it was more about like ghosts and such, and
yeah, but what are ghosts? Are ghosts? So I one of the reasons, and I've said this a number of times, I do not fear death anymore, not even slightly, because I understand that every thought I have is being uploaded to the Akashic record, and maybe the Akashic record can manifest itself through these structures into sort of like a plasma-like form, but not a plasma-like form, but like a macro etheric form, and express some will. So like when you start thinking along these lines, the actual concept of a ghost becomes a thing that can literally manifest itself. And it could be that, you know, when people were doing these kind of summoning spirits, they are creating a empty etheric body and calling into that the consciousness that exists everywhere all at the same time of a particular entity. And to do that, they would need necessarily something from a person that's closely related. So it might be a piece of hair, it might be the actual person, like the physical person, because they are quantumly quite close to the entity that they want to bring back. I guess this is what people do when they're, you know, they're going to have a seance with someone who's very good in spiritual contexts. They say, "Oh, is it your grandmother or your mother or something?" Because those people are connected to them literally through their DNA and their cryptographic key. They would probably be able to summon those people more readily. The question is, can those entities that exist everywhere all at the same time, can they force themselves and take over a living organism or a plasma type structure or an etheric matter type structure? Certainly, religious texts suggest that these things might be possible, and the more I learn about this science, I'm forced to confront the fact that probably some of these things that are recorded in religious texts and in fables actually have some basis in truth. And are we getting to the science of it all? That, you know, that's the question I have to keep asking myself. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does clarify things, and I think maybe with that, if they can control us, there were some streams ago where, or it might be old, where you talked about vortexes that were seen in the head.
Yes.
And so if these ghosts could control that, then they could, in theory, maybe control us.
So I would argue that we can actually learn from our predecessors, because the information that they put into the Akashic record and even their spiritual experience and existence can be read by us. I saw my dad very, very clearly in a dream the other day, like he was literally in the room, and I'm pretty sure that's because I got into a space where I could read his spirit sending me a message. And, you know, lots of people, when they have a loved one that passes on, they have these experiences where they genuinely believe they've met that person in their subconscious very viscerally and had an experience with them. And probably that's the case. I certainly believe that possession is true to a degree, having understood this technology. Now, what I'm more concerned about, and I've expressed this very clearly, is that if your DNA is handed to a third party, that those that know how to build these resonant fractal toroidal structures could encode, particularly if they had some sort of quantum system or some sort of system that's able to control self-organized plasma, so that they are able to imprint the cryptographic key of your DNA onto a plasma structure, and then use that plasma structure to communicate with you or receive information from you. They could effectively possess you through that mechanism. And this is what I really fear is probably one of the more terrible aspects of understanding this technology. Could be done. And so I would urge anyone to never give their DNA away to anyone, and encourage all members of their family. You only need a couple of members of your family to give away your DNA, and you know you're stuffed. Someone else has the ability to control you. Someone outside of your DNA, like far away, I think they would have to work very hard to possess you or take over you as an entity unless you invited them in somehow. And I've talked about how when you have a person like a very good friend, although you're genetically very different, you can build a connection. And this happens, I believe, also with love, and why I think love is literally the most important emotion that we have as humans is because the action of love, and when you truly love someone, or that whether that's a friend or, you know, Jesus or whatever, you are giving them access to your Akashic record and vice versa. And I think this is how, if we were to argue that possession can occur, you allow and invite a spirit to come into you. And once it's there, because I believe it's so hard for them to otherwise gain access to you, they don't want to go. They don't want to go at all. And you are then literally possessed with this other spirit in you. I've discussed privately with some people how I think there might be an issue with accepting organs to a degree. And this is why I think it is incredibly important that when a donor is donating an organ, that they actually say, I want to donate an organ. Okay? They need to have a card, and it's their mental intention that I'm going to donate this organ. When you don't have an intention put into the Akashic record of the donor of the organ to donate that organ, let's say the organ is taken from them. They're in India. For some reason they borrowed some money from a loan shark, and they say, well, you know, I can waive the debt if you give me your kidney. Well, that's not really something they wanted to do. And if that kidney goes into you, that's their DNA in there, and you could partially be, you know, it might be the plasmoids, and you might call them, but the two spirits that are existing, they don't want to mesh, and so you might reject that organ. So, you know, I don't know, there's complex things that get very spiritual when you start discussing these things about ghosts and stuff. But, you know, just you need to respect people's wishes. Intention is probably incredibly important. And do not leave yourself vulnerable. Do not, like, you hear these stories. I heard it at my public school that I went to. I was a boarding school, and there was a couple of kids. There's a famous story, and I don't know, it was from the 60s or 70s, and they were playing with a Ouija board, and one of them went literally freaking nuts. And they did invite this spirit in. So, like, you know, I've continuously had to eat humble pie, and there is many people out there that would think the Bible is nuts because it says these things, you know, and spiritual people say you need to protect yourself, and the whole idea of exorcism, all of these things, you know, they didn't come about necessarily just because someone. I don't think people. Did people charge for exorcism, or did it because it was a good idea to try and cleanse a soul of an invading spirit? I don't know. But yeah, I think if you've got more conduits for a spirit to enter a different realm, it might want to take them. So yeah, yeah. Does that get closer to answering your question?
Yeah, definitely. And it's so crazy that everything seems to come back to this type of science, the vortexes and such, that it's all connected with all these theories that people would call you a nutcase for believing in. And
yeah,
it's
so I'm finding so I spend a lot of time speaking to people that don't necessarily want to hear, but I do practice finding out what arguments work and what don't from the selection of arguments that are possible, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because some of these concepts are too difficult for people to rationalize because, you know, they just don't want to have to think about it. And that's okay. Sometimes you've got to accept that some people, they like their simple life. And it's not like I have a complicated life, but I try to, well, actually, I never intended to be thinking about these things, but it's just the way, it's where you end up. And then I find it's literally, I would advise anyone to go to any important museum near them and just look at what's in the museum. What all of those people, hundreds, thousands, or several thousands of years ago, thought was important. And you're going to see these vortexes everywhere. Why? Why is it always the same pattern? And so the paper you're referring to came out on June the 15th, 2023. And it was from the Technical University in Sydney. And they use functional magnetic resonance imaging. And this is a technique of magnetic resonance imaging where they can see if you've got oxygenated blood, it's diamagnetic, and if it's deoxygenated blood, it's paramagnetic. And when they were giving cognitive tasks to a conscious individual, they saw phase singularities of magnetic vortices and anti-vortices traveling around the brain. And I think these are emergent phenomena that comes from the delocalized electrons above and below the benzene rings in the microtubules of each neuron. You've got millions of these things in every neuron. And the arrangement of those, I believe, are driven by your DNA, which is what leads to your cryptographic key, which leads to your unique fractal toroidal moment generating communication and receiving device that leads to the specific pattern that you will exhibit. And which is why your DNA is the most important, other than gifting your access through the action of intention through love. These are the, you know, you just got to be careful who you do these certain things with. Yeah, but so that's the paper. And I was convinced for many years that, and because I experienced weird feelings in my brain when I was standing next to some of these low-energy nuclear reactors, and I said publicly, very clearly on, I think it was on GS 5.3 when I was with Alan running experiment there. So I just feel, when I get close to this reactor, I feel weird. And I feel it sometimes with the cavitation devices. And so I've put that on the record. And then when I realized potentially it's this fractal toroidal structure, then I thought, well, it must be what's going on in the brain. It absolutely has to be. And then that paper came out showing that is, and they don't even know it's producing a toroidal moment, but it is producing a toroidal moment even if they don't want it to. They have no choice, it's producing a toroidal moment. And so, and the point is that this can communicate across all space and time almost instantaneously, in my view, which means like when I get a feeling that my sister is not well, and I phone her up and she says, I was just thinking about you. And I said, I was just thinking about you. What's going on? And, you know, she says, oh, I've got this and that and the other. And you know, that's because you have a connection. You get that with friends, with lovers, and with family.
Yeah, it's extremely interesting. Thank you for your time.
No, I was listening. Thank you for the question. Okay. Okay, so it's quite late. If anyone's got a question, then I'll take it. Otherwise, it's nearly 2 o'clock for me here. If anyone has a question of anyone else, has a question for the floor. Someone's asking, how do I save this chat? I don't actually know. Maybe I can download it. Maybe I can get a copy of the chat. I don't know. I see. There's a chat which has got some nice comments in it. I see Doug Zorg has put some entrances to Schrattel and Erdstahl energetic transportation facilities comprising bedrock hewn and stone-built chambers and blind or annular segmented tunnel systems have been weathered and repaired multiple times over thousands of years. Some entrances are artfully hidden in the crypts and basements of churches, castles, palaces, and farmhouses.
So
Yeah.
actually, that's specifically to William, but I guess I accidentally sent it to you. But I gave a link to Heinrich Kusch's website. If you want to, could you make that visible to everybody? That's well worth it.
So I think so. If not, I will copy and put it on the blog. So it's
in there. It's one of the messages of 6 or 8 messages above.
Yeah, I can see it. It's www.unterwelt-kusch.com. How do I show that? I can show the message here. So it's on YouTube. So there we go. For those people on YouTube, it's in the middle frame here.
Yeah, it's
okay.
All in German, but the pictures are worth 1,000 words.
Thank you. I look forward to having a look at that, Douglas. Okay, did you want to say something?
Hello.
Yeah, did you want to say something?
Yeah. I just wanted to ask you really quick. Are you familiar with? I'm sure you are, with the work of Wilhelm Reich.
I've seen a few things of his. Yes, I spoke about the Cloudbuster because it's got.
I thought it was a really interesting counterpoint to the Thunderstorm making machine, and I watched a really fascinating interview with his daughter, talking about how he was using the Cloudbuster to literally chase UFOs, and to literally, he believed that UFOs actually ran on orgone energy, which is, of course, electromagnetic frequencies, which is what the pyramids run on. I actually was just at Egypt in December, and I was actually able to feel those electromagnetic frequencies, and it was crazy. The number of downloads increased exponentially after visiting several of those pyramids. But I really believe that what he was talking about is chi, or
yes,
orgone energy, and so my theory is, what if UFOs literally do run on this orgone energy, this chi, which is actually our life force?
Yeah, they do. In my view,
They do.
Yes, they do. But so do we.
Yeah, I know. That's quite fascinating.
So you go and
so
look
they
at
basically, no wonder they can feed off of our energy.
Yeah, so go and have a look at the blog remoteview.icu and type in the search field Shishkin. And Shishkin does an article on orgone energy being the same as Messiat's ectons, being the same as Ken Shoulders EVOs, being the same, and everything is static electricity. But he then goes on to define what static electricity is more.
Whoa.
So it's
Static
all the same
electricity.
thing, but it's also standing waves. The orgone, the Cloudbuster is basically a load of cylinders, which they have a aspect which is very narrow in one aspect, and then a very long aspect. So it produces basically vibrations in one direction, and he puts it into water, and water is providing the frequency. So
wow.
So yeah, it tunes itself, and then sends out the it's basically how do you call it, coherent waves, because it can only work in a coherent. You've got loads of tubes, and they're all doing the same in phase and same frequency. I guess that's the point.
Well, I really found it fascinating that you answered in the affirmative.
and in fact, on my blog, I did a video which looked at cloud busting, but I actually went through the book, and I think I've given a link to the book. So the book that talks about chasing UFOs, but I'm not so sure he was chasing UFOs, but actually manifesting them, because he's beaming the coherent matter into the sky and causing them to create themselves. So that they're not, they are unidentified flying objects, but they're not alien creatures visiting us.
Right. This is the thing. I mean, some UFOs are physical objects, but some are orbs or these are living plasma, as you say. You know, I had the most incredible experience at Mount Shasta one year. I was up there. I specifically went up there at 2 o'clock in the morning to see what I could see. And there on top of the mountain, 7 miles away, I saw orbs manifesting for 4 hours straight on the mountaintop only. And they would manifest for 2 or 3 at a time. They would fade up really bright and stay lit, and then they would fade down. And this went on for 4 hours, and I never knew what it was until I saw you talking about living plasma.
Well, I actually got invited to go to Mount Shasta last year, but that would have been very nice and very, very nice, but I couldn't. No time, no money. It is a very special place, though. Apparently, it's got the best water in America. Is that right?
It truly is.
Right.
I love it.
Yeah, and a lot of people report it having energetic effects and seeing these orbs going around.
I really wasn't expecting to see anything, to be honest, when I went there.
Do you know about the geology in the region? Of course, it gets quite cold, but and it's quite elevated. Do you know if there's any kind of like granite there, or anything that could cause ionization extremes?
Yeah. I don't know for sure about that. All I know is that there's reputed to be a vast underground tunnel system under there, as you probably heard, the city of Telos. I'm like, tell us all about it.
Okay, well, I have actually Yin Gazda went and spent some time there last year, so that's John Hutchison's former partner. So, yeah. I shall speak to her probably in the next week and find out what she knows about the tunnel system.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time, my friend.
It's a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it today, guys. Sorry I couldn't get to everyone on YouTube, but hopefully you had a clear listening of everyone there. I'm going to go back to the group here and just say I'm going to remove everyone from the spotlight. What will that do? Hello. So we've got a few people in here. So thanks, Ken, William, Kelly, Alex, Lithnick, Richards, iPad, Trevor Beardsley, Barbara, Ted Kozowski, and Doug. I really appreciate your talk as well on those findings in Austria. And I'll see if I can get into one of those. I know a few people in Austria, and maybe they can get me in contact with this guy, and we can go and have a look. I'm particularly interested. When I saw the walls, I was particularly interested in whether it was using HHO or something to smooth those walls, because it looked very similar to, oxyhydrogen gas treated granites or whatever. So I'm interested maybe to take a sample. Let's see if we can find some iron-rich crenellated spheres in there. There's a bunch of stuff I want to do. I can't hear you, but say what you're going to say. You need to unmute.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, one of the tests that Dr. Kush did was they took industrial strength magnets wrapped in a certain fabric or sticky fabric, and they passed them up and down actually the very section of wall that you see in the photograph on that link I gave. In that section, they put powerful magnets wrapped in a sticky membrane up and down the walls, and they tested, and indeed they found metal alloy. They found little slivers of metal rolled up inside little balls of stone. So some tool that was made of some complex alloy, and that was heating the surface, so that little slivers of metal were ending up curled up inside little balls of stone. That's what they found.
Okay, I want to have a look at those things. All right, thank you very much. All right, so I'm going to say good night, everyone. I'll say good night to everyone on YouTube. So, buenas noches, dobro noc. And